Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode here at the Damage Report. I'm John Iadarola. I know my name, you may not, and I've never met a person who can pronounce it, so apparently I've now joined that group. But anyway, I'm here, and we have a special treat for you today. Returning, Abelina Sabrina. Sabrina, how's it going?
It's going great. Thank you so much for having me back, John.
We're very glad to have you here. We are partly taking you out of your native habitat of Twitch. We are still on Twitch, of course, but also YouTube. For those who may not have watched your streams before or seen you on a few different shows on our network, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Hi, potential new people. My name is Abelina Sabrina. I have a YouTube channel where I make sketch comedy, usually about political situations. And I also have a Twitch channel where sometimes we play video games, but most of the time we talk about American news, politics, exciting events going on. Stuff like that.
Awesome. And so you do a lot of different sketches and stuff like that, but there was one in particular that I really loved, which was a few months ago in the wake of Kirsten Cinema's incredibly condescending thumbs down moment. You did a video parroting that, and it went viral, and it actually got you on the news for that, right?
That's right, it did get me on the news. I just did a bunch of really silly dance moves that incorporated saying like, no, as she thumbs down the minimum wage increase. And yeah, I got invited to be on like one of the local Arizona news stations to talk about it. And while I'm pretty sure they just wanted kind of like a fluff piece, oh, our state's going viral. I made sure to use my time wisely and keep criticizing Kristen Cinema.
Exactly, yeah. No, and it is exactly what, like there's a lot of comedy on YouTube and everything, but this is what it should be used for. Like, yeah, you're joking around and you're dancing or stuff like that, but it's about a person who is condescending effectively to a whole country, but to potentially millions of her own constituents in Arizona who elected her in part to help their economic situation, and instead, she has fun with it. I'm gonna go viral. Look at me, I'm a maverick. So I was so happy to see that.
Thank you.
Anyway, we've got a lot that we're gonna be talking about through the course of the show. So thank you everybody for joining us, regardless of where you're at. Maybe you're on the members app, maybe Twitch, maybe YouTube. I don't know, maybe there's a platform I haven't heard of yet. But thank you for being hit there. Is my name really spelled with an L in the description? That's what I'm being told. It is actually. So not only did I mispronounce it, but it's wrong in the description. Yay. Anyway, please hit the like button, share the stream if you haven't already, so that people know we're live. And of course, as we always do, we're gonna be responding to your tweets, super chats, comments, and all of that as we go. So feel free to send those to us. If you have any comments or questions for Sabrina as well, we'll be responding to those. And through the course of the next 85 minutes or so, we're gonna be talking about the big lie. We're gonna be talking about children being mistreated, both historically and today in Canada as well as the US. It's a bad day for the children, basically. We have finally found, after a couple of years of trying, an excuse to talk about the cartoon Archer on our show, one of my favorite cartoons. So we're gonna be talking about that. And a little bit of an update on the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the path to paying for it. There are now incredibly wealthy interests who are organizing to stop one thing from happening. We'll be breaking that down in a little bit. But that said, Sabrina, you ready to jump into this thing?
Let's dive in.
Okay, let's do it. Actually, we're gonna be starting off with a video, so let's jump right into that.
If you say it long enough, hard enough, often enough, people will start to believe it.
That is true. Of course, we've known that for a long time. Trump apparently has understood that throughout much of his life. He repeats lies over and over and gets people to believe it. But maybe never before has his continued repetition of a lie been as consequential for the future of America as it is with the big lie, the idea that the election was stolen from him, which has laid the groundwork for elections to be stolen in the future. That is now one of, potentially with just critical race theory, one of the animating forces of the GOP, the idea that we need to get people into office who are going to change election laws to make it easier to stop people from voting and to overturn elections. And Trump by himself can't necessarily do that. He needs support, and he has been successfully assembling an army. And now adherence to loyalty to the big lie has become a near constant for those running in the upcoming midterms. Of the nearly 700 Republicans who have filed initial paperwork at the FEC so far to run for either the US Senate or the House of Representatives, at least a third have openly embraced Trump's false claim about his defeat. Many of them, 136, are sitting members of Congress who voted against Joe Biden's Electoral College victory on January 6th. So, there's a lot of crazy people who are running for office. There are more QAnon candidates than ever before, but this is one of the big unifying things. I don't know how many secretly support it and would vote accordingly, but Sabrina, so far, a significant chunk have openly said it was stolen and something needs to be done about it.
That is terrifying. Even seeing like the most recent public events that he held, a lot of people were just there to hear anything. They don't even truly care what he has to say as long as it's some sort of plan. And even this morning, as I was watching the news on YouTube a little bit, I got an ad for Trump, and it didn't even have like a clear message. It just said we're gonna take back the election, take back all these other seats. And it's like, what is the call to action here? It's so unclear what they want.
Yeah, and that was an ad that was by Trump that you're seeing?
Yeah, it was him talking to the camera. It was a Trump ad. Wow. It's like, you're not running, what's happening?
Well, he's always running. It is a perpetual thing. He needs to keep his base in line in this period between elections. But yeah, they look, what a lot of people like, it is not just the right, but there is a desire to feel like you are a victim, and the right definitely loves it. There's nothing they love more than largely controlling everything and feeling like everything is arrayed against them. So this is a perfect version of that. They lost the election, and it was pretty close, but the reasons they lost feel, in hindsight, I think fairly clear. Trump presided over an absolutely horrendous non-response to COVID. Yeah, you might lose an election as a result of that, but they're not satisfied with that. It has to be cooler, and what's cooler than Joe Biden and the Democrats, not in power federally and not in control of the states that mattered, somehow still stole the election. They don't like obvious reasons, like we didn't run on anything, we didn't offer anything, and so the people didn't support us. It has to be something more conspiratorial, because this is a people who are, it's not just that they follow conspiracy theories, they are conspiracists. They think about the world as being about these hidden machinations and groups behind the scenes and things like that. That's like the QAnon stuff, sort of behind the scenes, the deep state stuff being talked about publicly. It's now all melded into one thing. Everything can be explained however it needs to comport with what I already think about the world. And you're seeing that even in the sort of ads that you're casually coming across as you're browsing YouTube.
Yeah, I don't know why I got that ad specifically. Not sure what I'm Googling to get that, but it seems that some of these people are just so out of touch with reality, where the facts are not on their side. So they are pulling at, very loose conspiracy theorist threads, because that will give them something to attach their logic to.
Yeah, and to feel comfortable. They like, and again, this is, I think, mainly true of the right, but it's true of more of other people too. People just don't want psychic trauma. They don't want their head to hurt. And so in media and in politics, they're just getting better and better at making sure that people always feel comfortable. They always have some explanation that means that what they thought about the world is still true. Everything's cool. We may be out of power for now, but it's all part of a bigger, grander scheme. But anyway, let's go into some examples of this. So we now know from an analysis that a large percentage of the Republicans who are running in the Senate and in the House, who might well be a part of what is looking like it's going to be a Republican takeover, since the Democrats aren't doing anything, believe in the big lie. They're publicly advocating for it. And I expect that is going to become even more common as we get into the meat of the campaign. But what do those people actually look like? So let's jump into a few examples. Mark Fincham is a state House member running for Arizona's Secretary of State. attended the January 6th protest in Washington, and he says he never came within 500 yards of the Capitol and did not condone the ensuing violence. But video footage later emerged showing him in front of the building's steps after it had been breached. And you can see that on the 6th, now he's like, I mean, I was like 500 feet. I like sort of see in the distance, but I don't condone any of that. On the 6th, he tweeted, "What happens when the people feel they've been ignored and Congress refuses to acknowledge rampant fraud, hashtag stop the steal," with a picture of people swarming the Capitol. So on that day, he wants to be cool. I get the anger that people are feeling. I'm there, I'm with you. Oh, they're trying to kill people and we didn't succeed. I wasn't even 500 yards away. I was really far away. So bravery and cowardice, depending on the circumstance, Sabrina.
Yeah, I mean, when people like him were tweeting like that the day of, January 6th, they were talking as if, they just didn't have any sort of consideration for the consequences of their actions. Like they thought that something even bigger was going to happen, and they thought that no matter what, they're gonna be okay. Nothing bad is gonna happen to them because they thought that they were on the right side, even though they clearly weren't. It just goes to show you can, depending on, where you are with like the people in power, for example, you can get away with a slap on the wrist and nothing will happen.
Yeah, exactly. And they were clearly waiting and seeing. Like some of them have tried to turn, like try to change their stance, like Fincham. Like, oh no, I totally didn't condone it. But does anybody believe that if they had succeeded somehow, like they'd stopped the certification, Trump refused to leave office, it's 6 months later, he's still president, Mark Fincham would be like, this is unacceptable democracy, Trump, you gotta get out of there. Does anybody think that? No, it was all contingent on the outcome. And by the way, so I was just curious. Okay, good. I'm glad I found it. When I saw that tweet from Mark Fincham, what happens when the people feel they've been ignored and Congress refuses to acknowledge rampant fraud on the day? These are great patriots. These are MAGA heads. They're gonna get in there. But then remember, once it started to look bad and the country didn't like it, then it was, well, that was actually Antifa. You know who claimed that? Mark Fincham did. In his January 10th newsletter, he said that it was Antifa infiltrators. But wait, I thought it was what happens when the people have been ignored, stop the steal. So it seems like who they are is very dependent on whether they succeeded and what the country thinks about you.
But also, if it's Antifa, why wouldn't he want to, investigate further? If he's so anti-Antifa, like that's all the more reason to look into it, and yet you don't seem to want to. You hate those guys. What's up with that?
And by the way, he was there. Is Mark Fincham Antifa? I don't know. I wasn't there.
He's the CEO of Antifa, actually.
Yeah. Anyway, very briefly, let's talk about some other examples. So you have Representative Jody Heiss, former pastor and former talk radio host, was elected to Congress first back in 2014, largely by touting his opposition to homosexuality, but has since taken up election fraud as his big thing. He was one of those who voted to block the certification. So it's a combination of new people as well as some that have been there for a while. It's a combination of people who are in Congress or running for Congress or for the Senate, and people who, like Mark Fincham, are running for Arizona Secretary of State. So they're trying to have a majority in DC, but also be able to manipulate the outcomes in these individual states by taking over state election offices. Then you have people who seem like they would be the ones that these conspiracy theorists would be attacking, but you have Melissa Carone in Michigan, a former contractor for the election vendor Dominion Voting Systems, who drew ridicule after making outlandish claims of fraud at a legislative hearing in that state last fall. This is a woman that Cecily Strong parodied on SNL. Has filed paperwork to run for a state house seat. So it doesn't matter how embarrassing you were, you could potentially capitalize on making these claims. You have Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania, state senator who's now running potentially for governor, recently told Trump that he could start an audit in Pennsylvania like they've got in Arizona. So if you liked it in Arizona, and few have, it could be coming to others. So it's all over the place.
It really did. Trump really opened the door that anybody could really have a voice in politics. Well, I mean, usually if you have money and you're white, but in that sense, anybody could have their voice be heard.
Exactly, yeah. And I just want to briefly cover this. How do you end up with an entire movement, a movement composed of people running for office at all different levels of the federal government, as well as media, which is uniformly decided that this thing, the attack on the 6th, that we all agreed for like 5 minutes was bad, was actually not bad for a variety of reasons. It's bad because those people had a legitimate grievance, or wait, no, actually they were Antifa, it wasn't us. But then Trump said that he loved them, which doesn't make sense if it was Antifa. So I guess they were good patriots, and no wait, it was actually the FBI. They were good, but the FBI got them to do it, which still is a crime. So they got rid of that idea very briefly. So, but whatever it was, it certainly wasn't white supremacists. So how do you get all of this? Well, Media Matters has done a great analysis of the different threads of this attempt to hijack the narrative. And so I want to just briefly give you an idea of how this has happened. So you initially got right-wing media encouraging people to participate in this. So after the 2020 election, right-wing media outlets not only spread many lies about the election, but also fanned numerous fantasies about a potential maneuver that could take place on January 6th, leading to Trump remaining in office. So Trump was doing this, telling people, if Mitch McConnell does the right thing, I'll be president. Or maybe if Pence does the right thing, I'll be president again. But the media did as well. So they got people excited for something big to happen. They also, on the day of, immediately began defending it. So when the mob was storming the Capitol, a number of far-right commentators openly cheered on the attempted coup. Fox's straight news coverage also seriously downplayed the violence. So they didn't cover it nearly as much as other networks were. And when they did, they didn't show the most violent content, the most violent video. But at the same time, all over the right wing, you had tweets like we showed you from Mark Fincham. These are people who were like, this is awesome, let's do this. You had, that faux right-wing populist senator who was like doing his like big fit, like this is awesome, we're gonna do this. They would backtrack briefly, but that's what they were doing at the time. Then immediately, once it didn't succeed and it didn't look good, they started attempting in a variety of ways, which I was parodying earlier, to pretend that it wasn't actually the Trump fans that they were celebrating in the moment. So following the insurrection, they pivoted to new narratives that attempted to cast responsibility with anyone except the obvious perpetrators. So it was Antifa, or it was just a couple of crazy people, or it was the FBI that did it. We don't know, but it certainly wasn't us. And ever since then, and that succeeded, it convinced a lot of people. Then it was, okay, something happened, but it wasn't an insurrection. You don't need to be scared about it. And Tucker Carlson has really deserved more of the credit for this than virtually anything else, insisting that there was no insurrection. You have people like Ron Johnson insisting that there were no weapons when there were, that there was no violence when there was, that they were orderly when they were not. All of this disproven in video that you can see, but it's been incredibly successful in convincing people. And Sabrina yes, Josh Hawley, thank you, Miss Jones. I don't know why I forgot his name. But anyway, Sabrina, is there any way to respond to this? Is there any way to convince the people who are not yet convinced that this was bad that it was, or is that just a fight that regrettably we've lost, that this captive audience has succeeded in misinforming them on?
I think if maybe you talk to these people and you go through the events of what happened, but you say that it was orchestrated by, say, Black Lives Mattered, and if you took out like the patriots and the MAGA hats and stuff, and you just told them exactly what went down, but they're wearing BLM shirts instead, I think we would have seen extremely different coverage. I think Tucker Carlson would have, had extremely different things to say, and that's how it goes to show it doesn't matter. There's always going to be an excuse as long as the people who are perpetuating the violence are on their side.
Yeah, and I think that you're clearly right. I mean, look, Tucker Carlson, we know that at times he cares about violence or disorderly conduct. When some of the protests last year, there was destruction of property and things like that, he covered that nonstop. He was so incensed by it that he would use B-roll of fires months afterward to describe, like he's talking about protests that weren't violent, but putting up fires that had been set months before. So clearly he can care about it. He can fearmonger about it when he wants to. It just has to be the right sort of violence, I guess. Okay, so this is all ongoing. We're gonna be evaluating a lot of these politicians in real time as we get close to this midterm. But for now, we do have to take our first break. When we come back, a couple of rough stories about mistreatment of children by the historical Canadian governments as well as the current US government. We've got that for you after this. Okay, everybody, thank you for being here. Let's see what's going on out there in the audience. We have a super chat from George who says, Tinkerbell Dragon, welcome back. Is that a name that we decided on, was it?
Am I Tinkerbell Dragon? You know what, I remember a few got thrown out last time. There was like Dimple Dragon and like Bubbly Dragon or something. I don't remember Tinkerbell Dragon, but that's cute.
Well, you get to choose your name. So I like it, George, but you get to decide. Okay, let's see. Kenny from Philly says, unlike Agent Orange number 45, Birds, Dragon Daddy, and Abelina Sabrina can tweet. That's true. Very briefly, I saw a video. I've been trying not to talk too much about his lawsuit because I think it's absolute BS. But he was asked in his press conference if you were allowed back on all these social media outfits, would you rejoin them? And he said, that's a good question. I don't know that I would. The F out of here. If you could get back on Twitter, he'd be like, join right now. I want to tweet. I want those retweets. Come on, lying ass. Anyway, Doomslayer Dragon says, avoiding Trump ads is half the reason I have YouTube Premium. Also, nice to meet you, Miss Sabrina. That's nice.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, thank you to our new members on YouTube, including Jesper, who joined at tier 1, getting access to our emojis and all of that. Wiccan Dragon joined at tier 2, getting access to our weekly top 10 list. Just yesterday, Francesca and I did our top 10 TV shows that were regrettably canceled way too early. That was a fun one. Breaks my heart to go over some of those shows that we're never gonna get another season of. Okay. Thank you, Genocide Dragon. I appreciate the super chat. A non-human humanist says, historically, children and women have been mistreated. Verding Kinder, Swiss or Magdalene Laundries, Ireland, till even like the 1990s. Hungary just built prisons for the unhoused. Will it ever stop? I don't know. I hope a lot of good people are trying, but yeah. And it isn't just the US. I'm glad, especially when we have international viewers that can remind us of some of those things that have happened in other countries that I may not have direct knowledge of. Genocide Dragon sent another super chat. Thank you very much for that. Doesn't have a message, but it's still much appreciated. Over on Twitch, Occam's Taser subscribed for 5 months. Thank you for that. Ching3871 subscribed for 8 months and says, keep up the great reports. I appreciate it. We try, it's in our name. The Bubba Master subscribed for 14 months. What the hell? Have we been doing this for 14 months? Damn. There was a hype train and it got to level 5. Thank you to the community for contributing a total of 21 sub gifts and 1,785 bits. Much appreciated. Love those successful hype trains, so thank you for that. Fromia subscribed for 7 months and says, Purple Dragon celebrating 7 months and a new job today. So great to see Abelina Sabrina on the show again. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for that. Okay, a Florida Dragon says, I wish we could stop conflating vandalism, which is wrong, during BLM separate from violence during January 6th. I 100%, I hope that you get that I was using that as a rhetorical tool to point out his hypocrisy. I don't believe that it's.
Oh, absolutely, and I know I mentioned that as well. I was not trying to equate the cause of like BLM with what those awful people did on January 6th. I was just talking about like from Tucker Carlson's point of view. He would try to not only equate it, but make BLM out to be like this awful thing, which it is very much not. They have very different goals.
Exactly. And one is fighting against something that's actually true and happening, police brutality. It's not totally made up by the right. So, but thank you for that, Florida Dragon, much appreciated. Okay, more news after this. Okay, everybody, I'm gonna need you to buckle up, hold on to your butts. We're about to launch into a couple of really rough stories. Throughout the Biden administration, we have, I hope, had reason to have a little bit of higher expectations for how kids would be treated at the border. I mean, after all, opposition to the intentional, cruel, malicious treatment of children under the Trump administration was one of the big unifying things. It got a lot of people fired up and involved in politics. So we should be able to expect more, but mistreatment continues. And so our indignation about the mistreatment must continue as well. And I want to give credit to a couple of federal employees with a whistleblower complaint about some of what's going on in one facility that's housed thousands of migrant children. So we're gonna give you the details. It is rough. So contractors in charge of migrant children housed at a facility in Fort Bliss, Texas, were trained to assist with disaster recovery, but had few Spanish skills and little ability to care for minors, according to this whistleblower complaint. So kind of seems like the sort of things that you would want to have if you're going to be dealing with kids who have just been through an incredibly traumatic experience, don't know America, don't necessarily speak English, and are now being held in horrible conditions. But that's not the direction we went in. The complaint describes a chaotic situation for the nearly 5,000 children housed in tents at the facility back in May, with federal employees from across the bureaucracy there for a few weeks at a time, with wholly unsuitable contract staff, and who were, quote, not permitted to interact with the children unless a child specifically approached them. So that's a complex one, bit of a mixed bag. With the history of physical and sexual abuse at these facilities, I understand wanting to have some safeguards against some of the monsters that work at these places. On the other hand, some of these are incredibly young children who have just been through horrendous conditions and now are not even being talked to when they're still suffering and might need help in a variety of forms, which we're gonna turn to in just a moment. So we have a lot more details, including some really horrific treatment of these kids. But Sabrina, what do you think so far of what was happening? Again, not under Trump. This is a couple of months into Biden being president.
No, absolutely. I don't think a lot of people who are, maybe more progressive people, I don't think that they're all that surprised by this. It didn't seem that like Biden and Kamala were going to put that much effort into this, even though it's a huge cause. A lot of people are really concerned about. I do know that once that like the families, because some of the kids do come here, alone. What they are doing now is so they won't have them like in the cages like they've had them in the last 4 years. They are transferring them to like these different facilities, but they're just so unprepared. They don't have enough supplies. They don't have enough like social workers for these children, even though a lot of these children do have families in the country that they could potentially be connected with. But an issue is it takes a long time because there are not enough workers, and some family members, if they could collect the children, they would, but maybe those family members are also undocumented. And the way that it's been going the last few years, it's like, are you gonna risk getting this child and getting you both deported again, or just stay quiet? So it's been a real struggle, and they've been mass hiring at these facilities. One just opened up in Pomona, California recently, and they have about 1,500 kids there, but wow. It's like they are hiring for Christmas at Forever 21. They are holding events at local hotels, and all you need to do to work at these facilities with these traumatized children is childcare experience and be bilingual. And that is it. Starting pay is like $24 an hour, which sounds nice, but these kids need a lot more help and attention than they're getting right now.
Yeah. Well, so thank you for letting us know about that. I didn't know that. That's very useful information, and also seems like higher standards than they have in Fort Bliss. That they expect you to have childcare experience and be able to at least marginally speak the language is more than we apparently were getting in one of these even larger facilities.
That's
where kids are being housed in tents. So let's jump into some more of the details and give you an idea of what's going on there. So according to the Government Accountability Project, based on the whistleblower accounts, many contract workers seem to view their job more as crowd control than youth care, while some individuals plainly meant well. And I don't doubt that, by the way. I can be really harsh on some of these, and some of them are absolute monsters. I don't doubt that some of these people want to be helpful. Anyway, carrying on. Other contract workers exhibited impatience with children and were plainly unsure of how to supervise them. Speaking of the company that was contracted for this, they said youth care is not in its portfolio. Okay, so with that, I can be mad at that company. I can potentially be mad at some of the employees there, but I can also be mad at the Biden administration for giving them the contract if that is not in their portfolio. I understand that there was a surge of kids and that you do need to hire, I have a feeling that you can and definitely have the obligation to do better. You can't simply bring on literally anyone, not into an area to do a job where there is a long documented and recent history of horrific mistreatment, of rapidly spreading COVID, of sexual assaults, of blackmail with threats to deport, generally non-children, but God only knows. So no, you have to expect better of that. But let's give you some more of the specific details. The complaint details how stacks of bunk beds made it difficult to keep a line of sight on all children, many of whom were visibly distressed. The ServPro, that's one of the companies involved in the contracting, also used loud music to wake the children each day, with some bunks just 10 feet from giant speakers. So I don't think that it requires like a master's degree in childcare or child psychology to say that that's not what you're supposed to be doing. That sounds like what you would do as a mild form of torture on individuals to mess them up, to get them to comply with you, which is likely exactly the way that it was rolled out here. Any other thoughts, Sabrina, so far? We do have some more details, but this is some rough stuff.
Oh my gosh, that's so dark. That's psychological warfare that they're committing on these poor children. It's like, really, you can't even do an alarm clock. These kids already have it as rough as it is. It breaks my heart. And you're right that there are good meaning people who do go into this and who care, but like they have to follow certain protocol. And I feel like some of the people who are organizing this, who decide on the rules that maybe some of these like managers or the youth care workers have to follow, they are out of touch.
Yeah.
And they don't know what's actually good for the children, at least on a day-to-day basis. So I'm extremely concerned.
Yeah, they, by the way, someone in the audience, Cornerstone Boxing Promotion says, doesn't ServPro do water and fire damage restoration? Yeah, that's their portfolio actually. Now they say it was subcontracted, it had nothing to do with us. Well, if you're subcontracting, it very much does have something to do with you, but maybe stick to the fire damage restorations. In any event, let's give you a few more details. So the complaint says the contractors on site repeatedly fought attempts to help children at the facility access medical care. One of the whistleblowers said she had to push for medical care for a child who was having a panic attack, and another girl who had not had her period for months but was now bleeding profusely. I don't know about this specific incident, but I am not shocked to find out that private contractors, these private companies, are not giving kids access to health care, because that is expensive and they are in this to make money and they want to avoid having to spend more money. The children were housed in tents for as long as 2 months or more. It appeared their bedding was never washed. Many beds were visibly dirty. The children also reported having insufficient clean underwear and socks, which in turn made them reluctant to exercise, obviously. Their day was largely unstructured. During the day, they were typically either sitting or lying in their beds or milling around with relatively few activities available to them. Because literally any of that, the lowest bar of caring about these kids' welfare would require the expenditure of a bit of money. And they're not in this for kids' welfare, they're in this to make money off of the kids, whether it psychologically damages them, whether they get sick, whether they have lasting trauma, physical or otherwise. That is the danger when you get private companies involved in this and you don't exercise oversight, whether that's ServPro or whether that's the Biden administration itself. And so all of this is just so disgusting, and we're gonna talk about it and we're gonna put out this video, and I guarantee people are gonna be less invested in it than they were when we did similar content a couple of years ago, back in 2018, when I almost swore, when a similar situation was happening. Any final thoughts?
These conditions are so inhumane. If CPS got a hold of a household that was even doing a small fraction of this, those kids would have been taken away. And so the fact that these are like government facilities that are allowing this to happen is just disgusting. They need more help than this.
It is, and by the way, I think this was something that was brought up in our production meeting this morning, but Mini Morpho on Twitch says, where are all the people saying save the children? It's weird, they never actually seem to care about real children. Hypothetical, conspiratorial children, they definitely care about them. Actual children being abused, Nobody cares.
Yeah, they're not pro-life, they're pro-birth, but I think we all knew that here.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, so let's turn to something even darker. That's possible. Protests have been ongoing, and some really amazing op-eds have been trying to draw attention to what over the past couple of months has been revealed in Canada, having to do with these schools which were run by the government, set up by the Roman Catholic Church, and which resulted in the deaths of thousands and thousands of Indigenous children. And so there was a protest just this weekend, actually, in St. Petersburg in Florida, trying to put pressure on the church to respond to this and try to have some kind of justice or whatever would pass for justice. It's impossible to have true justice, but some of the demands that were made at this protest include a full apology from the Pope directly to Indigenous people, the prosecution of all living school employees for crimes against humanity, no matter their age, immediate review of all boarding school survivors who are currently incarcerated, and a multi-billion-dollar donation from the church to establish an entirely Indigenous-run language and cultural revitalization initiative. So we've mentioned this a few times over the past couple of months as some of these stories have been breaking, but we wanna give you some details in case you haven't seen that. A Canadian Indigenous group said just 2 weeks ago, a search using ground penetrating radar had found 182 human remains in unmarked graves at a site near a former Catholic church-run residential school that housed Indigenous children taken from their families. Just last week, investigators found at least 600 unmarked graves at a site of former medieval Indian residential school. Last month, the remains of 215 children, some as young as 3 years old, were found buried at the site of yet another school. And so what you need to understand is that there were at least 139 schools of this sort operating in Canada. And they have found these remains by searching some of the schools. They have searched 3 of the schools, and they found hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of remains. Do we want to take a guess at what they're going to find when they continue to search more and more of these schools? I think they're gonna find a continuation of the pattern. And we'll talk more about the history of this, why these schools were set up, and a bit more of what's likely to happen there, or that happened there. But Sabrina, I wanted to give you an opportunity to jump in.
I am scared to find out what the final total number of graves that we're going to find. And you know what? That might not even be reflective of, all of the children who have gone missing over this time. But especially I saw that Prime Minister Trudeau, he wants an apology on Canadian soil from Pope Francis. And yes, I think that would be meaningful, but I really don't think that's enough. And especially from Trudeau, where, over the years, he has not been very respectful towards the Indigenous people in the Canadian area, where he still allows the Trans Mountain Expansion pipeline to be built over Indigenous lands. He does not actually care, I think, about the lives of the Indigenous people in the area. If that's what if he actually does want to make a difference, I think a symbolic apology is just below the bare minimum. He needs to do so much more. He can't shift the blame.
Yeah, and especially that would at least acknowledge it. And honestly, in 2021, getting governments to acknowledge what they did is hard enough historically. But as you pointed out, these are not historical concerns purely. First of all, the schools ended not that long ago. They ran up until 1996. So this ain't ancient history anyway, but they're still abusing a variety of these different populations right now. So then that's why I wanted to give you the details of what those protesters at St. Petersburg were asking for. Is that the right compensation? I have no idea, and to decide that. So, but it shows that an apology is just the beginning of what's merited at the very least. And so let's give you some more details. Obviously, what we've already told you is devastating, but from the late 1800s until 1996, Canada removed 150,000 Indigenous children from their homes and forced them in institutions run by church staff where they had to cut their long hair and were forbidden from speaking their language and practicing their culture. But that was only the lightest of the mistreatments. So you can get a lot of details from a lot of different places, but just some of what was inflicted upon these, again, more than 150,000 children. There were fatal fires, accidents that were frequent, and an unknown number of children escaped only to die from exposure or misadventure as they tried to make their return to distant homes. Sexual and physical violence were widespread and likely a cause of deaths, whether directly or by suicide. A National Truth and Reconciliation Commission was established back in 2008 to investigate the schools, calling the practice cultural genocide. Many children never returned home, and their families were given only vague explanations of their fates or none at all. So a van pulls up, takes a kid forcibly away from the family, strips them of their culture. Many of them die, and the family, if they ever find out about it at all, are told vaguely that there was sickness or something. So if the kid was murdered there, if the kid was sexually assaulted there, if the kid desperately tried to escape to flee back to their family and died as a result of that, likely many of those stories are just gone. The families never knew, they will never know. And by the way, 3/4 of those schools, the 130, were run by Roman Catholic missionary congregations. There was a mixture of others as well, but that was the vast majority. There's been some investigations and things like that. I want to give you one more detail though that I found in reading about this. So, and this was written in the Guardian. It's an op-ed by Blackstock and Paul Mader, who I believe are First Nations activists. I apologize if I'm getting that wrong, but they're trying to keep the pressure on this particular issue. So they talked about the myth that the government had in Canada had spread that people back then didn't know better. So you can't get that mad about this because nobody knew what was going on. This is kind of what we hear about every historic atrocity in the US as well. Like, sure, slavery is bad, but it was a long time ago. Nobody knew. Nobody knew that it was bad, which of course erases the fact that there were people trying to stop it then. There are always people, like the Trail of Tears had opposition when it was being planned and when it was being carried out. So the same thing is happening here. And they point out that that's not true. There were people who were trying to raise public awareness decades and decades and decades before the closure of these schools. So they had a public health physician. They talked about Peter Bryce, who published The Story of a National Crime, a report detailing. So Scott is Duncan Campbell Scott. He ran the schools for a couple of decades. His stonewalling of public health measures in residential schools, where child death rates were 25% a year. Bryce had been raising the alarm since 1907. And there was accounts from kids at these facilities. So there was a letter written by a kid named Edward B. in 1923. So 73 years before the schools were closed, said that the boys in the school were so hungry that they were eating cats and wheat. His letter eventually found its way to Duncan Campbell Scott, the man I talked about who ran the schools for a couple of decades. He responded that 99% of the children in the school were too fat anyway. So if they were starving to death or eating cats they caught, hey, what are you gonna do? They need to lose weight. So there were people who do, there were people who were trying to raise the alarm about this. And for decades and decades and decades, the church did nothing. The government did nothing because they liked what was going on. They supported the cultural genocide that is talking about. Devastating, Sabrina, I know. Any other thoughts?
No, yeah, not only did they actually know better, they just didn't care. They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew that what they were doing was genocide. And it's because I think they did it in part because they knew that they didn't actually have a true claim to that land. So to essentially eliminate and supposedly assimilate the remaining people there, it was their goal. They knew exactly what they were doing. And it is so shameful and disgusting. And I'm looking forward to some of the solutions that they're gonna try to. And like you said earlier, we're never gonna have true justice, but I wanna see what the next best thing is.
Yeah. Okay, everybody, so that was rough luck, obviously. So we're gonna take a short break. When we come back, we're gonna mix things up with the rest of this first hour. And I believe we're gonna talk a little bit about what's going on in the run up to the Olympics, which are looking like they're gonna be exciting for different reasons than usual. So all that and more after this. Okay, everybody, what's going on out there in the audience? Well, Deirdre Dragon became a tier 2 YouTube member. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate that. Hope you enjoy that top 10 list. And if you have any ideas for future top 10 lists, you can post those in the comments of the last one. We always look at those. Fiel Foten, I believe I probably butchered that pronunciation, but thank you, says, got my first gonna have my second dose scheduled this autumn. That's awesome. Glad to see that. We've got all these variants spreading. Everybody take care of yourself if you have access to it. Okay, Joe Schmo says, at this point, engaging with the right in good faith feels a bit like debating the Water Boy's mama in Monty Python's argument clinic. I didn't see that particular one. I thought at first you were saying like the mama in, isn't the Water Boy the comedy movie from the 90s or whatever? She was difficult to get through to. Anyway, 3Dosia says, have you discussed the National Guard rental to Texas border yet? I think that we talked about when Nome in South Dakota sent some, but there's the Ohio governor is also sending some people to the border. None of them are on the border, so this is just them competing. It's like, again, it's vice signaling. Okay, let's see. Wayne Sugihara says, sorry, but I can't get the image of John with Sabrina's hair out of my head, but not the reverse. Odd, huh?
You can't picture me with like a buzz cut?
Who would do better? Me with long purple locks, her with the buzz cut.
You with the purple locks.
I think so. I think so. This image could use more color, I think. Thank you, Wayne. That was a weird one. Anyway, Rhonda says this post is to offset my diehard right-winger sister in Texas. Love you guys, love TYT. Can I have Roxy Dragon? You can. Thank you, Rhonda, for watching. Sorry about your hard right-winger sister in Texas. There are good people in Texas. I lived there for a number of years. Maybe you live there now. Okay, Garcia says, where's the churches that make trips to Mexico and South America with clothes, food, and books? So really fast. I have no doubt that with these facilities that we're talking about, there are almost certainly some religious charities that are trying to do the right thing. But I would expect it to be the norm, not the exception, particularly when the right has been taken over by these conspiracy theories about the government abusing children. Maybe care about it. Maybe like do something about it when it's happening right now. And you'd be criticizing Biden. So like it's a slam dunk, man. Go deal with that. It's Biden attacking kids. But they don't care. They don't care. Okay, let's see. Thredosia says it was reportedly paid for by a private donor, talking there about the deployment of the National Guard. Yes, to the border. By the way, there was a super chat saying, where is it? G.A. Jackson says Trudeau's father was the largest donor and supporter of the schools while he was PM himself. I don't know that yet. I have a lot of faith in our audience. I will assume that it's true, but I have not checked that. That would be terrible. Yes, so Trudeau, might want to do something to offset a bit of that. Anyway, let's see, we're down to 38 seconds. Okay, C Cloud, thank you for subscribing for 11 months. You've almost hit that 1 year mark there. We really appreciate that. Wasabi Dragon gifted 5 tier 1 subs. Thank you, Wasabi. Shakinga Ko subscribed for 5 months, much appreciated. Ms. Frazzled subscribed for 7 months, and the Tap Dragon for 3. And then just put the message, yeah. You know what, Tap Dragon? Yeah. Thank you for subscribing. Kefix hit 12 months, the big 1 year mark. Thank you for that. And let's see. Ooh, we only have 5 seconds. Okay, more news to come. We'll see you on the other side. Okay, I don't know if we can fit both of these in this period, but we're gonna try to as we launch into our next story. Man, this bipartisan infrastructure deal just keeps getting better. I mean, sure, it doesn't like have anything great and it doesn't acknowledge climate change, but at least it was gonna be paid for, right? And hey, they said they were gonna put a little bit more money into the IRS because we know that money that goes in the IRS produces even more through their enforcement of corporations and other tax dodgers. Maybe not. Maybe we're not gonna get that. They already stripped out the tax increases. So now they're looking to potentially strip out the funding of the IRS as well. They had proposed $40 billion. Again, this was Republicans and Democrats doing this. They believe that would then bring in $140 billion in new revenue. Taxes that are supposed to be paid by the wealthy and corporations, but that are traditionally not. And you'll recall, by the way, I believe it was ProPublica that just like last month came out with that amazing expose of how billionaires are getting away with murder and dodging their taxes. Well, this would help fight back against that a little bit. And I was wondering ever since that report, what's gonna be done? Well, now something is being done. It's just not productive. There are a number of well-funded conservative groups that are drawing particular ire at the IRS provision. So trying to stop that extra funding from going. You have, let's see, the Committee to Unleash Prosperity, which definitely has the interests of working Americans at heart. You have Freedom Works, you have the Conservative Action Project and the Leadership Institute that are preparing a letter that warns Republicans that they should not negotiate with the White House unless they agree to no additional funding for the IRS. And the groups, by the way, that are doing this are funded by major conservative donors, including the Mercer Family Foundation, the Sarah Scaife Foundation, and Donors Trust, which is a donor-advised fund that gives to conservative and libertarian causes. You also have people who work for Americans for Prosperity, involved in the Koch network. So what do you know, exactly the people that we would expect who are now trying to get rid of not just the tax increases, they already succeeded on that, but just enforcing the tax laws we have right now, catching people who dodge their taxes. Even that is a bridge too far for them, Sabrina.
It still always amazes me how, these right-wing groups or right-wing politicians can, start their demands so strong, like, oh, well, we're not gonna negotiate with the White House unless we get X. But then even though, Democrats do have like a little bit more power right now, they will automatically start these negotiations by conceding already and starting in the middle, like that 40 billion number. Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, look, Biden's initial deal kind of blew. And then they cut it by more than $1 trillion, I think $1.4 trillion to get to the bipartisan one. And we're supposed to be excited about that, or maybe there'll be reconciliation. Let me ask you, if you're in the audience, how much have you heard about this over the past week and a half or so? Does it seem like they're working hard in it? How about that voting rights bill? How hard are they working on that? They wheeling and dealing behind, because they're certainly not wheeling and dealing in front of the scenes. But anyway, I want to give a little bit of credit to Robert Reich, who is trying to remind people of how much the persistent defunding of the IRS has harmed its ability to do its legal job. And by the way, while it is generally the Republicans that cut the funding from the IRS, let's not forget that you had a number of years where Democrats were in charge where they didn't refund it. What do you know? Maybe they're defending the same people. But anyway, Robert Reich tweeted, "The richest 1% of Americans dodge $175 billion in taxes every year, fund the IRS and stop enabling the real looting in America." And so what does that look like? Well, when you deplete the IRS's funds, their enforcement budget goes down by 23%. They lose even more personnel. They do less than half the audits they used to. The audit rate for the biggest corporations, the ones who are potentially concealing the most tax dodging, fall by over half. And the audit rate for millionaires has fallen by 71%. Well, I'm sure that the parties are really eager to get those numbers back up. Lots of their millionaire donors are probably just so excited to have audits start coming their way again. So this is like the easiest thing to understand why they're fighting back against it, but it's also so transparent. I mean, it's one thing to lie about how taxes can't ever go up, but to say the IRS shouldn't even be funded for it to do its legal job, I mean, they're really cocky if they feel they can get away with that. And they might be right, by the way.
No, yeah, that's BS. And to think like even like during the Obama administration, because I think it takes about 5 years or so to fully train like somebody in the IRS. So we had the time to prepare for this, but I think the IRS is like at its absolute lowest that it's been in like a couple decades or so in terms of like how much funding it has. So we had time to prepare for this, and that's why a lot of people this year are struggling in getting like their returns back, their refunds, because they're just so short-staffed. And certainly COVID didn't help, but it's not something that like a year's notice would have helped. We've known about this for a while.
Yeah, it's been a very successful campaign going back at least a couple of decades, generally led again by the Republicans, but given a massive assist by the Democrats. None of them have any interest in the IRS being able to do their jobs, because sure, that means that the government then has the funding to do a lot of stuff, but they don't really care about getting that stuff done. And certainly not if it's going to infringe on the fact that the wealthy donors that they have are getting away with economic murder. In any event, let's very much switch things up and talk a little bit about sports. Nothing we like talking about more on the damage report than some sports. Let's do it. The Olympics in Tokyo are going forward, but they're scaling back a little bit. So they had been saying for some time that they're going to have spectators, not international ones. That's a bridge too far, but they are going to have people in the stands. Well, that has now changed. A state of emergency has been declared. And while the games will be going forward, they will not be having fans in the stands. The prime minister said that it was essential to prevent Tokyo, where the highly infectious Delta COVID variant is currently spreading, from becoming the source of another massive wave of. And by the way, they reported 920 new coronavirus infections on Wednesday, the highest number since back in May when the numbers briefly went over 1,000. They've been put under a state of emergency now for the 4th time. And they say that it's regrettable. They would have loved to have fans, and certainly Japan wanted it to be an attempt for them to sort of show the international stage that they've recovered from some of the natural disasters and things like that. But they're still in the middle of one, unfortunately. Sabrina, it's looking like it is going to be a scaled back experience after all.
I think it's mostly going to affect the people mostly in Japan, obviously, and the athletes. But for the rest of the world, we usually watch the Olympics from our home TVs anyway, so I don't think it's gonna have as that big of an impact. But I would just be more concerned about the actual athletes and the people who need to be there. I'm concerned for them of actually catching it.
Yeah, I just saw news that some worker in the Olympic Village had COVID. So I know that they're like the vast majority of the athletes are being vaccinated, are going to be tested constantly, and I'm assuming that's true for most of the workers as well. But you don't get to be surprised by this situation. Like, people have been protesting there for months about this, trying to get it fully canceled. And I get that it's not up to Tokyo necessarily. They don't have the authority to just shut it down. But yeah, new variants are spreading. It is dangerous. Getting rid of the spectators seems like almost about as little as you can do, other than nothing. You're really, as Sabrina says, you're not really losing that much. The games will still go on. We'll still be able to watch it. It's not as cool of an experience for the athletes maybe, but it's much safer overall. And by the way, it's possible that some of the events being held outside of Tokyo might still have spectators. So there's still room for a disaster. We'll have to stay tuned and see. Anyway, okay, we unfortunately are coming up to the end of our hour, but we have a little bit more on the Olympics when we come back. So I want to thank the linear audience, whatever platform you're on, for watching. Love that you're staying tuned to the show. But if you're watching on Twitch or on YouTube, we've got a lot more planned, including not only the Olympics, an awesome one-person protest that you got to see to believe. We have some competing strategies for getting people vaccinated. So we're gonna mash up Dr. Fauci with juvenile, which has the better strategy for getting people vaccinated. That should be fun. And then finally, the cartoon Archer gets talked about on the damage report. They said it couldn't be done. They said there's no reason for it to be done, but we found a reason, and we'll have that for you after this. Hey YouTube, hey Twitch, thank you for sticking with us. It's me, John, and Sabrina. Sabrina, it's been great to have you back on. It's been a little bit.
This has been so much fun so far. Thanks again for bringing me back.
Thank you, and thank you for suggesting a number of the shows or a number of the stories that we're actually covering on the show.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Okay, so before we launch back into everything, we have a little bit more on the Olympics. I did want to let you know about a few things that are coming up. So first of all, and I feel like you are the target audience for this information. Tomorrow is a very special day. It is the 1-year anniversary. I have some exciting news that we'll be announcing tomorrow. So you'll have to stay tuned. What does it include? What does it not include? Tomorrow you'll find out. Tomorrow, by the way, is also Friday. Now that was for a very long time the day that Brett Ehrlich was on the show. Then he stuck a knife in my back, Game of Thrones style, and went to work on a different show for a couple of months. But tomorrow, the epic return of Brett Ehrlich once again, throwing political garbage in the can. So 2 reasons to stay tuned. But one more reason to stay tuned today, immediately after our show. I'm gonna be going off to do an interview with David Dayen, which will be up on the channel in a little bit. But the stream continues with Indisputable. Dr. Rashad Ritchie is gonna be joined by David Schuster of TYT's Rebel HQ, so that's gonna be awesome. And so you know Dr. Rashad Ritchie, you know Indisputable. It's an awesome show, it's killing it. So definitely stay tuned. You can go to youtube.com/indisputable_TYT to watch that right after the damage report. And now let's see what y'all are getting up to out there in the audience. Nicole Smith says, according to the Texas Tribune, almost 150 guards are staffing an empty Texas prison as state officials work on Abbott's plan to use it for immigrants. Oh, Texas is just the best. Iron Dragon says, greetings dragons, it's my B-Day today and I'm loving my new Rainbow Dragon tank. Have a lovely day, y'all. Iron Dragon, happy birthday. Love that. Franklin Sharp Slicer says, top 10 Ferengi rules of acquisition would be nice, or tomorrow's war would suffice. If crazy were gold, we'd all be wealthy. In the meantime, stay healthy. Spoiler, tomorrow wars, people attacked by Repubos. Okay, well, I haven't seen that yet, but thank you for the super chat, that was a good one. Henrietta Lockhart says, I run Talon Books. My best seller is about 3 generations of women surviving residential schools. They called me *1, Secrets in Survival at an Indian Residential School by Bev Sellers. That is amazing, I'm gonna have to take a look at that. Thank you, Henrietta. And Jessica Sabo has a request. David Dole from Rational National as a guest on TYT or Damage Report would be amazing. Let's make it happen. I believe he's been on TYT. He has not been on the Damage Report yet, but I would be more than happy. Let's see if he's interested. Okay, with that, Sabrina, you ready to launch back in the news?
Let's go.
Okay, let's do it. You know what? Let's just go right into the video.
Okay.
So in that video, you see 53-year-old Kyoko Takahashi involved in a protest against the Olympics. She had said that the reason she was opposed to it is because still less than 14% of Japan has been vaccinated, which is actually quite a bit higher than when we started talking about these protests. It was at 9%, so they're doing a little bit better. But she wanted to show that she was opposed to it, so she waited in line for the torch to be run past, where she produced a super soaker to try to put it out. Obviously, the optics are a little bit funny, but she has a point. Like, bringing the Olympics here is potentially going to get people sick, cost people their lives. And while this one, it might be a little bit easier for it to go viral because of the imagery, these sorts of protests have been going on for a few months. And so I'm glad that this is something that's at least gonna get some recognition internationally for it. Sabrina, what do you think?
I like her protest. I mean, as long as like what's in there is just water and not something crazy like acid, but I mean, it's a plastic little super soaker water gun. It's fine. She's not going to hurt anybody, but she definitely got her voice heard. And like you said, I think her concerns are super valid. And I mean, it goes to show that her concerns were valid, because now there's a state of emergency and they're not allowing spectators. So who knows? Maybe it's going to keep getting worse.
Yeah, maybe. Well, as a result of this, not only did I learn about what she's involved in, but I found out that there's apparently a long history of protests involving Olympic flame. It's happened in multiple countries going back literally decades, and it has at least once succeeded. It has been someone that snatched, I think in Rio, and actually put it out. So she wasn't successful. That was just one part of the torches route though. Now that that's gone viral, I think that it might spread. You could have a couple of people, and there were bigger super soakers. I don't know if you remember, maybe it wasn't when you were a kid, but when I was a kid, there were some pretty big ones. They should definitely watch out. Anyway, like we're joking, but they should take it seriously. You gotta protect people. Japan has lost 14,800 people, which is, it's much better than the US for their population size. Obviously, they're doing a lot better, but that is still a devastating death toll. And it's not weird or wrong or unexpected that their population would like to keep those numbers low. Now, speaking about trying to keep those numbers as low as possible, let's launch into this. There have been a lot of different ways that people have tried to get those who are not currently vaccinated in the US to do so. It's now available virtually everywhere. We just need to get people to actually take it. So some seem more successful or more likely to be successful than others, some efforts. So I want to contrast two. And these are two individuals that we mash up constantly on this show. Dr. Fauci, and then we'll have another one for you in just a sec. So here is Dr. Fauci recently on the news talking about the difficulty in getting certain populations vaccinated.
What is the problem? Get over it. Get over this political statement. Just get over it and try and save the lives of yourself and your family.
So I don't have to speculate that that's not going to be a successful message, because Fox News picked it up. The right has, and that's obviously not all that he said. He spoke for like 6 minutes straight about vaccination, but Sabrina, the right has picked it up and said, how dare you say to get over it? I have serious concerns that have been drilled into me by Tucker Carlson. I'm not just gonna get over it. It's not political, it's just that every MAGA head believes it. So it's probably not gonna work, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna work. And as much as I believe what Fauci is saying, I think he's saying the right thing. I don't think if he's trying to reach those people on the right who are, a little hesitant, I don't think he should be the person telling them. I don't think it's effective for them, because the way he says it, get over it, just do it, they're gonna double down. They're not gonna listen to him. So they need to have some sort of a Bruce Springsteen concert, or get Clint Eastwood out there, or Reagan's corpse. They need to do something to really encourage these people. Somebody on their own side that they would trust.
Yeah, drop it for the Gipper or something. I don't know. Anyway, Fauci's not gonna reach it. I know some people are probably like, well, John, you've said that the opposition's a political thing. Well, yeah, I'm not Dr. Fauci. You should have higher expectations for Dr. Fauci than you do for me, please. But and also I don't expect, I'm clearly, if I was capable of convincing conservatives to get vaccinated, we'd be in a better position. I've given it the old college try. Clearly, I cannot accomplish that. And it doesn't seem like Dr. Fauci is gonna be successful either. I mean, even Trump told him to get vaccinated, it's not working. Mitch McConnell just yesterday told him to get vaccinated, it's not working. So we need to mix things up. We need a wild card. And I believe that we've got it in a sort of joint thing with BLK, which is, I believe it's a dating app. Juvenile is back with a remix of his classic hit to try to get people to get vaccinated. Here's a bit of that video.
You finna online date chat, find a mate chat, open up BLK ass, okay yeah, profile picture looking tight chat, nice chat, got your bio reading right chat, precise chat, but before you find a date chat, you gotta wait chat, gotta go vaccinate chat, get it straight chat, girl you look good, want you vax that thing up, you's a handsome young brother, want you vax that thing up, dating real life, you need to vax that thing up, feeling freaky all night, you need to vax that thing up.
I know you can't stand it, no holding hands chick, but when we get the shot, we gon' be romancing, girl you could be the queen after quarantine. We could meet up at the spot and we could do the thing.
Okay, so That was better than I thought it would be. When I heard that they had remixed it as vax that thing up, I thought, I don't know, but that was pretty good. Sabrina, what do you think? Is that gonna win anybody over?
I don't know if it's going to win anybody over, but I think it's going to make a lot of people who are already vaccinated, really hyped, and maybe they'll try to tell more people. But I don't know if it's gonna hit hard with the current unvaccinated population.
Sure. And as people are pointing out in the chat, like there are multiple populations of people who don't want to get vaccinated. We sort of lump them together. And one of the reasons I lump them together is because the single biggest group is clearly boneheaded Republican men who don't want to get vaccinated because they were told not to by Mark Levin or whatever. But that's not the only population. I mean, prior to COVID, anti-vaxxers tended to be like, Santa Monica libs and stuff like that. They're like, the measles ain't that bad. So there's still a bit of that, and there are hesitant Black Americans who have been, obviously historically medical experimentation and abuse by the US government has left some suspicion. So this is not designed to win over conservatives necessarily, but perhaps for some, it could succeed. It's catchy. He's got some cultural cachet. Maybe it could work. It certainly has got a better chance of working, Sabrina, I think, than Dr. Fauci's attempt.
I agree.
Thank you. Sonic Boom Dragon wants a remix. Vax me up before you go. Okay, we gotta see that. What I wouldn't want to see never gonna vax you up. That would be a good way to be rolled, but it doesn't send quite the right message. Maybe he can become a crossover hit with anti-vaxxers. Anyway, with that, let's turn to very different news. The production company behind the very popular and rightfully so cartoon Archer, as well as Unsupervised and Chosen, has a number of their animators and other related support staff that have been working for some time to unionize and thus far have been stymied by their company. So why is this important? Why is this happening? Well, unlike animation studios in California, like Walt Disney Animation, Amazon Studios, Sony Pictures Animation, and Nickelodeon, which have been unionized for literally decades, in Georgia, which has this burgeoning TV and film industry, they have not yet, the animation industry, been able to successfully unionize. And a character designer for Archer, Mo Ballinger, says one of the reasons they're pushing for it isn't just for their 153 employees that they want to get in this union. It's to try to lead the way for a number of other smaller, less influential and successful production companies in Atlanta. They say we're the largest of these studios. That's why we felt strongly about this. We want animation workers on the East Coast to have the same conditions as those on the West Coast who are unionized. And apparently they began this process a couple of years ago with hopes of increasing their job security when shows are being canceled, studios downsized, jobs are frequently outsourced. You've probably heard stuff like this about animation and special effects people for some time. They do incredibly crucial work, and they are generally just ignored by the industry, and nobody cares what happens to them. They do fabulous work that gets Oscars, and then they all get fired. So it's great that the Floyd County Productions staff are trying to do this, but so far not successfully. Sabrina, I know this is something you wanted to talk about. What are your thoughts?
Thank you so much again. So yeah, I got to hear from a lot of the artists on the team. And the thing is, they like their jobs, they like each other, they do like their day-to-day professional lives there, and they don't want that to change. And that's the problem. They said that things started to change a little bit, once Disney, acquired, Archer now technically. And so now that they're sensing that new management is coming in and kind of changing things up, they don't feel secure in their job is one of the biggest demands that they want to change. They want to improve their PTO policy. They want more clear, comprehensive contracts so that way they could actually plan their lives and their futures, because they do want to stay within their industry. And they want equal pay for equal work. What a concept. It seems like their demands aren't even that high. And luckily, they're treated okay, but they do understand that they are one of the bigger production companies in the area, and they do maybe want to set a little precedent in Georgia, since Georgia is kind of a big spot next to California for production. And so they've been working with the Communication Workers of America. And so they already voted vast majority of them want to unionize, but it's the management that's actively not recognizing their union, which is the problem. So they had to go and file an unfair labor practice charge. And I think that's where they are right now. So as of right now, management has actually lawyered up themselves with a notorious union busting law firm. So I think that's where they are at the moment. And they really just, want eyes on what's happening right now.
Yeah, and that's why I'm really glad that you brought it to our attention, because there hasn't been much talk about it for some time, and you would hope or expect that there would. I mean, this is a production company that makes a few different shows. Archer is quite popular. There's a number of high-profile people who are on the show. I don't know to what extent they're supportive or talking about it. I think that would be great. I get why they might not want to get involved or whatever, but it would be great if they would, not only for this company and the dozens and dozens of people that work there, but as they pointed out, Georgia has become huge, and every year it gets bigger as an alternative to Hollywood. And I think it would be a terrible historical outcome if that just resulted in workers getting screwed over more. Like they use these tax breaks to get the businesses over there, but as a consequence of that, the actual people who do the work have far worse conditions. Why should that be the outcome? So they're like sort of sticking their neck out there. It's kind of like a version of the Bessemer warehouse and Amazon. Like there's gonna be a lot of other warehouses at Amazon that are gonna be trying to do this, but someone's gotta be working on it first, even if there's potentially strike back. So I'm glad that they're doing this. I hope that people talk about it. I hope that they get recognition. I do wanna give credit to one individual who is supportive of their unionization. That is Stacey Abrams, who sent a letter to the CFO of the production company back on March 16th. It said, "It is my understanding that a clear majority of employees who are eligible to be represented by the union have properly demonstrated interest in and signed a request for unionization. If that is the case, I strongly encourage your company to listen to their voices and recognize their mobilization." So that's Stacey Abrams, obviously very important there. Hopefully she'll stay invested in this, because they could use her star power to draw more eyes to it, I think.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, everyone. Let me read just a couple of quick super chats, and we'll launch into probably just one more story that might leave us insane. So it's probably best that it's the last thing we're gonna talk about. Matt Silver says, "If we got the J&J shot, how long do we wait for another shot?" Well, in theory, you don't get another shot. There might be some kind of booster or something like that, but as of right now, it hasn't been announced. So you're probably good as of right now. Let's see, Jacob Olison says, "Supposedly the Catholic Church is still selling indigenous artifacts on their account on eBay." Okay, I had not heard about that. That sounds terrible. Beta Ray Bob says, "Thanks to conservatives, we're going to have to cosplay / LARP the pandemic board game again." I hope not. There's a lot of expansions and other versions of Pandemic. I would prefer to keep those in the cardboard realm and not have to deal with those in person. Okay, Mike from Seattle subscribed for 5 months. Thank you so much, Mike from Seattle. Really appreciate that. BC Trumpet cheered 600 bits. How nice of you. El Moco subscribed for 9 months as well. Thank you to all of you. Really appreciate the support, and all of you throughout the show who've been gifting subs and helping to build the community. Very much appreciate it. Thank you to all of you. And with that, Sabrina, let's talk about this last one.
Oh boy.
Mike Lindell, how could a guy be this clearly detached from reality and never seem to lose his audience? The dude is more influential on the right than ever before, and he is going to put it to the test, because like some of the best grifters in American history, he believes that the person he worships is coming back, and he has a specific date. He says August 13th, Trump will be reinstated as president. And the thing about making it a particular day, he's previously been saying for some time that he's coming back, is that day is going to come and it's going to pass, and Trump is not going to be president. And the only thing that will change as a result of that day passing is I will lose a little bit more faith in humanity, because they're not going to cast him aside for his terrible prediction. They're still gonna love him. It doesn't matter, you can say whatever you want. So we've got a little bit more crazy from him, but Sabrina, what do you think about him getting more specific with his prediction that it's gonna be the 13th, somehow Trump is gonna be president again?
I just want to know what this 13 number means to him, like why this specific date. I truly have no idea where he's going with this, and the whole whiteboard thing behind him just looks weird. I actually had not actually seen the text on it, and so I mean, the fact that even like, when was it, like a few months ago when he was on Fox, and even they were telling him to like, hey, you can't be saying this stuff. Like, Lily, we're gonna get in trouble. You need to stop. And then he felt censored by Fox, and it's like, oh, now there's this division on the right, and it's like, honestly, I don't mind that. Go for it. You guys eat each other apart. We know about that. But I just, I can't pin this guy.
Yeah, it's a weird prediction. It's specific. Mr. Unknown on Twitch pointed out another reason it's weird. Who starts a new job on a Friday? Apparently it's Friday. Yeah, wouldn't it be Monday he'd come back? No, but it would be very Trump to come back, like give a little speech and like, okay, I'll see you in a few days. I'm gonna go relax for a bit. But anyway, you alluded to the other bit of crazy. Now, I hesitate to show this to the audience because once you see this, you will be mad. It's like looking directly into the pupils of Great Cthulhu. But let's bring up the picture. So you've got this board, which is supposed to prove, I don't know, it's how they get information to Trump, they say. You know what, I don't even like this version. Let's go to the next version that was put together by Spencer Rothball, who's just he's gonna complete what all of us were predicting. It's gonna have Charlie Day in front of it. Because that list, that board is just names. It's a lot of names. Every one of them is Pepe Silvia. But no, it's just every right-wing name you can think of with an arrow pointing at Trump and some Bible verses. And they posed in front of it. And that didn't lead the people in the room to think, oh, wait, am I in a cult? Am I with the crazies? It's like, this is a cheat code to know that you're surrounded by crazies. They did the board filled with names. How do you still not get it? It's just like, I'm looking at it. Sean Spicer, Lou Dobbs, Charlie Kirk. It's just arrows going around. Dan Bongino, some guy named Brick. Who's that? I don't know. There's a doctor. I've never heard of them before. Maybe it's the demon semen doctor. I don't know. Neither do they, because they're out of their minds. It's just names. Why would you put that together? It could be a bullet point list. You don't need the arrows. What's the point of the arrows?
Was this a group project, or was it just kind of like one person filling out the whole board by himself? Because it's like, if it's one crank doing it, you know what? Maybe you see weird people all the time, but if this was like a collective type thing, then I'm concerned. Because the thing about like the Pepe Silvia meme, it's like Charlie was illiterate. And he was misreading Pennsylvania, and that's how he got Pepe Silvia or something like that. And so it's like, how many people worked on this?
I think it is one crazy person who's been driven mad by lockdown, and eventually he's gonna take an axe and bust through the whiteboard. It's gonna be all work and no play, makes Trump president again. Anyway, these people are crazy and they are very influential and have far bigger audiences than us. So that's the last thing I'll leave you with to scare you. Anyway, Sabrina, it was a delight to have you back on the show. Thank you for joining us. Where can people watch you in the future?
Thanks so much for having me again, and for letting me pitch some stories for today. People can find me on youtube.com/Abelina Sabrina, where I make my comedy sketches, and sometimes I do political commentary. Or you can follow me on Twitch, same name, twitch.tv/Abelina Sabrina, where most of the time we'll talk about news and local politics.
Awesome. Thank you, Sabrina. Have a good one.
Thanks, Jen. Bye.
And for those of you at home, thank you for watching. Much appreciated. Indisputable is coming up with Dr. Rashad Ritchie, and David Schuster is gonna be on as well. So that's gonna be a lot of fun. Tomorrow is two things that you need to pay attention to. Three things actually. One, Brett Ehrlich will be back. Two, anniversary of the founding of the Dragon Squad. So we're gonna have a little bit of fun. And three, it is still garbage day after all. So if you could head over to the community tab on our YouTube channel, you go to that community tab, you scroll down, you will get to vote for who you think should be the Dragon Squad community garbage person of the week. It's the big return of Brett Ehrlich, so we wanna get that vote count high. So head over there right now so you don't forget. And until next time, stay safe out there, stay sane out there. I'll see you soon.
You know what time it is. Welcome to Indisputable. Good to be with you. We have a lot on the agenda today. Ladies and gentlemen, my debate guest, this is going to be interesting. We're bringing him back. His name is Christopher Naim, founder of American Veterans Policy Network. We're going to talk about Donald Trump and his new class action lawsuit against all of the social media big guys. So we'll see what happens, and we'll chop it up about a couple of other items as well. Also, to break down news of the day with me, the man, the myth, the legend, I have David Schuster, TYT contributor. Oh man, this is gonna be something. Okay, and also Varun Nakor, president of AAPI Victory Fund. We're gonna chop it up about what's happening in that front and also the rise of violence against Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders. We're gonna talk about that because it's important. Ladies and gentlemen, my top story. Donald Trump, just the myth. He has now said he is suing all of these big companies, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and this lawsuit is dead on arrival. So let me be very clear about what the former president of the United States is doing. I'm from Glenwood Road, so I peep game all the time. He's using this as an opportunity to become the great catalyst for his presidential run. That is all he's doing. He knows that this lawsuit goes nowhere. His attorneys are well aware that this lawsuit will go nowhere. Why? Because one, Trump does not want to subject himself to discovery, where he actually has to hand over information and testify to certain things. He doesn't want to do that. He will never get to that point. They're not claiming a specific amount of damages. As a matter of fact, Trump said trillions of dollars, because it is a phony lawsuit. And they're filing it as a class action lawsuit, claiming that this is about conservative voices. So let's go to some of the background. Trump, who has filed this lawsuit in the US District Court of the Southern District of Florida, was suspended from the platforms since January, when his followers violently stormed the Capitol building, trying to block Congress from certifying Joe Biden's presidential win. The company cited concerns that Trump would incite further violence and have kept him locked out. All three declined comment Wednesday. So he's saying that all conservatives in this class action lawsuit have been constitutionally violated by these private companies. But here's what's interesting. Posts by conservative commentators like Ben Shapiro, Franklin Graham, and others, they're still there. These people are still active on those social media platforms. Here's the big problem, okay? Here's the big challenge. Donald Trump can actually win this lawsuit, but there's one small thing that gets in his way. It's called the United States Constitution. The First Amendment of the US Constitution says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That is the actual Constitution. The amendment was included in the original document. It says that Congress shall make no prohibition to that freedom of speech, shall not abridge that freedom of speech. And the last time I checked, I'm not a legal scholar. I just finished 1 year of law school. I'm no constitutional expert. I just know how to read. Congress is not Twitter. Congress is not Facebook. Congress is not YouTube. As a matter of fact, based on interpretation of the Supreme Court and other federal courts, private companies have the same rights basically as if somebody stepped in your home. And if somebody stepped in your home and they started bumping their gums, talking jazz that you don't like, you can tell them to get the hell out your house. That's how courts have typically interpreted the right of private companies to say, here's what we will accept at this company, here's what we will not accept. So why is the lawsuit being filed? It is propaganda, it is PR, it is the new great evil that they are creating, because this is a win-win situation for Trump. Trump only likes win-win situations. If he wins the suit, let's say in La La Land, he won the suit, okay, that's a win. but he will lose the suit, but he will claim a victory saying that because of him, policies are changing. He's going to raise a bunch of money in the process. He's not going to spend that money on the legal case. He's going to parlay that money into his presidential run, or maybe give some of it to a few of the cronies that are going to back him, and they are running as well. That is what this is about. To break this down and more, I have the big homie, David Schuster, my brother. How you doing, man?
Dr. Richie, I am so honored, excuse me, I'm so honored to be on your show. I love what you're doing. I love the successes you've had, and it is great to be on with you, so thank you.
Man, the feeling is quite mutual, and I appreciate you being on Indisputable. It is a high honor. Let's talk about what Trump and his legal team are proposing. Is this something that holds weight or not?
Well, I think your analysis is spot on. First of all, the politics, it's smart for Donald Trump, right? Because he can say, hey, this is another grievance. This is another time where I've somehow been discriminated against and conservatives are being hurt by big tech. And even though that's not true, as you pointed out, Dinesh D'Souza, Ben Shapiro, a whole bunch of others are all over the place on Facebook and YouTube and the rest. But Donald Trump can play to his base and say, look, woe is me, they're hurting us, they hate you, we're all in this together, so let's go get big tech. And it's smart politically, it gets him a lot of headlines, it gets him in the news, which is something that he wants. On the legal analysis, you're also spot on, because private businesses can set their own rules. There's no First Amendment right to speak out in a private business. And so it's only the government that can say, hey, it's only the government that we're trying to keep from blocking your free speech. Facebook, Twitter, social media. If you want to get on an airplane, you don't want to wear a mask. Well, those businesses have the right to issue certain restrictions. The only possibility I could see in one scenario here would be as if Donald Trump was somehow able to show that he was discriminated against, because there are others, say, on the left, who have repeatedly violated the Twitter or the Facebook or the YouTube terms of service, say have called for assassinations or violence, and that social media did not take actions against them. And Donald Trump could somehow prove that this is only because, well, they're Democrats and I'm a Republican, therefore they're coming after me. But I don't see that evidence out there. And so I think you're right, this lawsuit is dead on arrival. It's total nonsense from a legal point of view, but it does make sense politically.
You know, there was a time in Donald Trump's political career, not too long ago, where he could make breaking news in the middle of the day with one tweet. That power has been taken away from him because he abused it. And frankly, I'm glad they took his account away. I'm actually not a big supporter of eliminating these accounts for a practical reason. David, I really believe you need to track these individuals. You have to know exactly what they're thinking and how they're talking. Now, governments have figured out a way to still infiltrate many of these groups, especially these white supremacist groups, because they have been forced underground, so they have other mechanisms to connect and to follow them. But Donald Trump was being so insanely aggressive and irresponsible with his tweets and his rhetoric. I thought it was only the proper thing to do to suspend him from these platforms. And think about this. Do you think it was going to get worse or better after he was president of the United States? While he was president, there was a level of restriction, even though it seemed to be off the rails even then, there was a level of restriction there that would not exist after his presidency.
Like, I hear you on both points. First of all, I agree. I think that sunlight is the best disinfectant, and I'd rather have everything out in the open and everybody be able to say whatever they want so we can all say, hey, look at what they're saying. But Donald Trump, you're right, was in such a unique position with his more than 50 million followers on Twitter and Facebook. I mean, nobody else has that kind of platform or had that kind of platform in social media. So I don't think you can say, oh, well, Donald Trump is just like everybody else, when he is calling for armed insurrection, when he is encouraging people to deny the election results, when he's talking about a coup and overthrow of the government, he is uniquely positioned to get so many millions of Americans riled up over that, so many millions of Americans who maybe just don't know better or follow Donald Trump blindly. And so I do think there's a certain responsibility that government, that institutions, that private businesses have to make sure that those people who are unique in our society, who have unbelievable followers and sway over people, that to try to make sure that those statements from them, whether it's online, whether it's on Twitter, that those do fall within the terms of service, the rules, and that you're not encouraging violence, which is what Donald Trump was doing.
You made a great point about the one possible caveat is the unequal enforcement clause. where they can prove, hey, this person said this, they were not suspended from the platform. My person said this and they were suspended from the platform. But I think the argument, one, has to be made about his influence. Everyone does not have the kind of following that Trump has. So that means there's a different level of actual impact. And these are very, very massive companies with a lot of people interaction. If you look close enough, David, you're going to find some unequal application. Hell, I've been suspended from Facebook, and I know somebody that's a friend of mine did the same thing, and they did not get suspended from Facebook. We've all been to Facebook jail or should have been in Facebook jail at some point, right? So there's this unequal application because they can't catch everything. However, the impact of Donald Trump must be weighed into the decision. But I don't think it goes that far. And here's why I don't think they're going to make that argument. I don't think any of these attorneys want to actually proceed with a real legal case. They don't want to get into actual litigation because it opens Donald Trump up to discovery. And if they attempt to play with discovery, they can be in contempt of the actual federal judicial proceeding. And I don't think they want to open their guy up to that kind of liability.
Oh, I've heard from some folks out there who say, you know what? I hope this does not get thrown out, because can you imagine the attorneys for Facebook, for YouTube, for all the rest, having the opportunity to cross-examine Donald Trump under oath in a deposition? I mean, that would be a gold mine. And so I know a lot of people, a lot of lawyers would love to do that. And I think for that very reason, you're right, this is gonna end much sooner than Donald Trump could ever be in some sort of deposition, ever having to face questions or allowing the social media giants to thumb through all of his various records and material that they would be entitled to under discovery in this deposition or in this lawsuit.
Yeah, so if the judge is anti-Trump, the judge will allow this to move forward as is. That's what will happen. Let me shift gears.
Yeah.
We've been talking about this on the program, David. There's this sentiment of civil war from Trump supporters. We've seen the conversation of civil war when he ran for president the first time. They threatened civil war when he got elected. They threatened civil war when he lost the election. There's an actual candidate. There's a congressional candidate who is known as the MAGA bride candidate. Because, can we get that picture? Let's put that picture up. She got famous because she wore a wedding dress, had her Make America Great, whatever, and she has her artillery. So she's known as the MAGA bride congressional candidate now. She's running in Michigan, GOP congressional candidate Audra Johnson, who became known as the MAGA bride after appearing at her wedding reception in a Make America Great Again dress in 2019, is warning of an impending civil war as she attempts to unseat a Republican incumbent who voted to impeach President Donald Trump for inciting the January 6th Capitol insurrection. Johnson, who is challenging Congressman Peter Meijer in the 2022 GOP primary, attended the January 6th Capitol insurrection, but claimed she did not go inside the Capitol. However, she, and I quote, knew people that did. Her exact quote, according to the New York Times, a story that she did, we're headed toward a civil war if we're not already in a cold civil war. Now, who is this person? Even on her website, she doesn't give you a lot of background other than the fact she's married to a former military official. That is it. That's really her claim to fame. She says the tired ass Sean Hannity talking points, I support the police. They all say that obviously they don't mean the Capitol Police. And she supports America and she supports patriots. But I found an interview that she did, and this interview really tells it all. It's a short clip, but it says a whole lot. Play that clip.
Is it us against them? Is that how you look at it right now?
Right now, I look at it as patriots versus everybody, right? Okay. I mean, you either love the Constitution, willing to stand for it, willing to fight and work for it, or you don't,
Us against them, patriots against everybody. And remember, her form of patriotism is actually white nationalism cloaked in the disguise of patriotism. David, your thoughts?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, Audra certainly seems wound very tight. I don't know about you, Dr. Ritchie, but when I go to a wedding, sometimes I like to, I don't know, cut loose, let loose a little bit. Can you imagine going to a wedding where the woman shows up with a weapon like that? Nobody's gonna have any fun at that wedding. And secondly, I mean, on a more serious note, I hate it when people try to compare something that's happening now and say, oh, we're in another civil war. Because to me, it's not only historically inaccurate, but it diminishes the significance of the real Civil War. And that is 600,000 Americans lost their lives in the Civil War. We fought over something that was huge, and that is trying to end slavery. For Audra Johnson to say, oh, if I don't get my way, we're headed towards another Civil War is absolute nonsense. And then the other part about it is, she's crazy. She's a lunatic. I mean, to suggest that it's us against them, that it's patriots who believe in the Constitution. I mean, you just established that the MAGA crowd doesn't believe in the Constitution. They don't believe in protecting police or the Capitol Police. They don't believe in the institutions of government. And so to me, this is somebody who, look, maybe she's a nice person and maybe she's compelling in some sort of weird way. But I don't see that there's anything there that would cause the good folks in Michigan, even in a very conservative district, to somehow support her and support her calls for some kind of revolution or civil war if she doesn't get her way.
Let me tell you, David, we said the same thing about Marjorie Taylor Greene here in Georgia. Okay, we said the exact same thing about her. And she decided to run the campaign the way she wanted to run it. She was a QAnon believer. She spewed rhetoric about black folks, brown folks, gays and lesbians, Jewish people, and she got elected. She won her Republican primary in a solidly Republican district. And you have more of these individuals who really historically would have existed on the fringes of their political party, now becoming the main voice inside of their political movement on the conservative end.
Look, it's a good point, and I do think we're having more extreme people who are running for office, and they have a better chance now of winning in some of these seats than before. But maybe because of the experience of Marjorie Taylor Greene and because of the publicity that this Audra Johnson is getting in Michigan now, I think there's an opportunity, at least for more mainstream Republicans and certainly Democrats, to make sure, okay, you want to run this candidate, you want her to be the Republican nominee. We're gonna throw everything against her and make sure that she doesn't get elected. Whereas I think Marjorie Taylor Greene may have snuck up on some people in Georgia, but in any case, look, I mean, it's not good for our politics when these are the sorts of people who feel emboldened to be members of Congress to run for office, because we spend so much time arguing over crazy stuff instead of trying to figure out, well, how can we deal with things like infrastructure and police reform and improving education and equal opportunity for everybody? Those are the serious issues we need to be focused on. Instead, we have these clowns who are distracting all of our attention.
She literally commits an act of terrorism. I know she says she did not go into the building. I don't believe her. I think she did. She says she did not go into the building, but she was with the crowd on January 6th. That crowd was part of a domestic terrorist attack in the United States of America against the US Capitol to literally stop a constitutionally mandated process. How can you be for the Constitution when you are bragging about being part of a crew who was actually against the US Constitution? Having that election certified is a mandate of the Constitution that thankfully Mike Pence had not drunk enough of the Kool-Aid to do. He did not drink enough Kool-Aid to stop that process. And look at where he's at now. He's getting booed at events that are conservative events. He went to a Christian event. He got booed at the Christian event. It's almost as if he meant absolutely nothing to the Republican movement. And this is a cult-like behavior, David. This is
I
part
agree.
of the cult.
And the fact of the matter is, even if Audra Johnson was not violent on January 6th, if she went into the Capitol building, she broke the law. She trespassed and she should be prosecuted, and she should therefore be barred or prohibited from being anybody's nominee, even for dog catcher, if that's what she wants to run for in Michigan.
Very well said. We got more on the other side. It's indisputable. Stick and stay.
You're about to watch some behind the scenes footage of the Young Turks.
Ooh.
Now, these are partial videos. If you want to get all of them, you become a member, go to tyt.com/join, and you'll get all the behind the scenes of me, Anna, John, JR, a little bit reality show like. tyt.com/join and enjoy this.
You know what you're seeing behind me? Jersey. Hold. Watch me flip this camera. However I flip it. Do I flip it like this? No, I just took a picture. I'm bitzing right now.
What?
Behind the scenes.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
For members? I don't have my face on.
She doesn't have her face on, folks. Oh, that's JR's ass right there.
You can't take 5 minutes off, can you?
No, I can't, Johnny Pie. I said it was live stream,
But I was lying. It's not a live stream. It's just for members.
Bitsy, this is my cat. You know what his name is? Kiki Cat.
Animals are innocent.
Control room and the insanity is obviously there.
Right now, as you can see, I'm directing or tech directing.
I'm so happy to be here.
This is what like a Labor Day beard looks like for Jank. Man, you're a Young Turks viewer if you recognize me like this.
Oh, thank you. You are the one person in my life I would love to meet.
What's going on, guys? This is a Bitsy or a BTS or behind the scenes with Hassan Piker, aka Woke Bay.
Oh, hi, I didn't see you there.
I have finished my show, The Damage Report, and now I get into a really awkward time of the day.
When I'm sitting, the control room is right there. So I can see Bart.
This is the Pittsburgh office, by the way. Referred to often as the boiler room.
You see how it's ripped? Is it super unprofessional to wear that at a business meeting? Or am I like cool rebel?
I just finished doing the power panel and I'm fired up.
What do you do for TYT?
Not a whole lot.
If you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it.
And thank you for being a TYT member.
Super last thing,
Because there's always got to be a super last thing.
oh, that was disastrous.
This has been behind the scenes, behind the scenes.
All right, welcome to Dr. Rashad Richard Indisputable. This is going to be quite interesting. I don't know if you can handle this much truth on any day of the week. The unrest inside of the black community and communities that support them. It's because these cops are not held accountable. You have a family calling 911, and that family is expecting help, not expecting their loved one to be killed by the very people they pay to protect and serve them. Did you ever notice a cop that you work with call any black person the N-word or target people because they were black? Nope. But we disagree that somehow police officers are not also subject to the same systemic biases and racism as any other level of law enforcement.
It sounds like for everybody's need who wants to crucify the cops without looking at it.
No, crucify bad cops, brother.
Of
bad
course.
cops.
We don't need the government to step into our lives mandating that we should be wearing a mask.
You think you putting on a mask, Trey, is government intrusion, but you don't think the government telling a woman what she can or cannot do with her body it isn't government intrusion.
Where does life begin?
You want to go there? I can read it to you, bro.
You seem very well prepared. Certainly more.
Of course, why would I not be well prepared? They don't stop, I don't stop. Racism won't stop, I won't stop. Systemic bias won't stop, I won't stop. People still need health care, so I won't stop. People still need criminal justice systems reform throughout this country, so I won't stop, and you won't stop either.
Climate is changing fundamentally, extremely, and non-linearly. It's becoming worse now. It's not when the levees burst that is the problem. It's in the anticipation of that.
So I hope every human being is safe. And by human beings, I do not include multinational corporations, especially the ones that started climate change in the first place.
What we're currently doing right now in cutting emissions is clearly not enough. There will be ramifications to what Trump is doing. I don't want people to suffer, but I feel like there's gonna be a lot of suffering because we have an imbecile as our leader.
Welcome back to Indisputable. We got a lot of viewer comments. I'm going to read as many as I can. Thank you for your engagement. Remember to watch me live on Indisputable TYT. That is the YouTube page, Indisputable TYT. Follow us on Indisputable TYT, Twitter and Instagram. All right, TYT member Cray Cray Souffle says, you mean Trump's totally stupid, laughable, gonna get thrown out of court class action lawsuit. That's the one I'm talking about. Exactly. Like the other 60 lawsuits he filed when he said he actually won the presidency. Same thing. Navinix says, plus it's Donnie Dump trying to trick his dumb fans into giving him more money. Well, they're not trying, it's done. It's a done deal. They will give him more money. YouTube, super chat. Devin HC says, Dr. Rashad won't disappoint, can't wait for the show. Thank you so much for that. Fitty Films says, best show on TYT. Well, bless your heart. Thank you. Gypsy Mama says, 45's counting on the suit being dismissed. If not, he'll have to answer questions about the 6th under oath in depositions. Correct. That's how it works when you sue somebody. Twitch. Bama Raider 12. Richie and the rest of TYT has given me a sword of knowledge to slay Republicans in debates and educate my fellow Dems. We're happy. We're happy that you said that. We aim to please. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I wish a Karen would.
You want to call the police on them for having a barbecue on a Sunday?
I feel free. Back off!
I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life.
This one is a little more complex because this Karen, and you know what we do, we follow Karens of the world because Karens are dangerous. This Karen is accusing a black male of being a drug dealer. She has her husband there. I assume this is her husband, maybe her boyfriend. He is trying to be a barrier between her ridiculous allegation and this black couple, specifically the black male. Now, according to the narrative, this is from Louisiana. According to the narrative, she thinks this person is a drug dealer because he's driving a Buick.
Beat the literally get beat the
ass beat. He don't know you. You don't know him. You don't know her. You get in the car. I'm about to.
Aaron, get your stupid ass in the car. Get in the car, Aaron. Get in the car, Aaron.
You do not know him. You do not know her. You don't know anybody around here. You are not special. Get your stupid ass in the crack dealer. No, he is not. Oh, what? Because he's driving a Buick?
You said crack.
Wait, you cross-check that? Hey, I'm sorry, y'all. Hey, if you see that bitch in the road, she can't handle. No, she can't handle a goddamn thing, man.
Aaron, get in the car, Aaron.
I mean, that's really an amazing situation. Now, I don't like how he was talking to her. I think they were both drunk, by the way, not just her. But obviously, the Karenicity in her runs deep because he gets involved trying to stop her from being a Karen again. I don't think this is the first time where she has accused somebody of something, got involved with a person or a couple she had no business even engaging with or talking to, but she's claiming this black male is a drug dealer, obviously has no evidence whatsoever. And here's what's ironic about it, more so than what you just saw. For some reason, her assumption of this person being a drug dealer gives her, I guess, the authority to start harassing them and standing behind their vehicle and making broad allegations against them. As I have said before on this program, I have not met a Karen yet who's afraid of a black male. So you can't hit me with this, well, they are afraid and they're acting out of fear. Hell to the no. Every single Karen, even the Karen who thinks the person is involved in narcotics dealing is not afraid to say it, approach them, be aggressive. But it looks like she had to walk home that day. David, does this stuff surprise you yet?
No, it doesn't surprise me. I think we're talking about Louisiana. Clearly, I think you're right. She was on something, drunk. I mean, look, credit to her husband or boyfriend or whatever he was for at least having the sense to know that that his girlfriend, wife is just is acting crazy. But what is it about Buicks? I mean, why do people say, oh, if it's a Buick, it's a drug dealer? I mean, look, the questions get into my mind if I see somebody, I don't know, driving a Lamborghini, like, well, I wonder how they got their money. But to immediately assume that somebody's a drug dealer, that's crazy. And I think it gets to, I think there's an awareness now well, that a lot more people, a lot of Americans are having, and that is we all maybe have friends or partners or people that we know who when they get drunk, their racism comes out or they're biased or they say things that are insane. And all of us have a responsibility to rein them in and to say, hey, get in the car, Karen, get back in the car. Don't be mean to her, don't abuse her. But I mean, we all have to stand up, even if we are, inebriated and we think that one of our friends is saying something. We all have an obligation now in this day and age to stop this stuff and to rein people in.
This was just so ridiculous that somehow you correlate a person driving a Buick to selling drugs. First of all, the only people I know who drive Buicks are over 60 years old and they don't sell dope, okay? They don't sell drugs. But to make that kind of broad connection and then accusation is really, I'm trying to figure out where did that come from? Was there a time, maybe in 1988 or something, where drug dealers only drove Buicks? I don't know where she's getting it from, is my point. Do you have any idea where she's getting the Buick connection from to drug dealing?
I have no idea, but I think what's probably going on is there's probably something in Erin's life where she can't afford something, she's got some financial difficulty, and rather than looking at herself and saying, okay, what could I be doing differently in my life? How could I be working harder, working smarter, being more effective in order to make more money? Instead of looking at herself, she's projecting, and she's got to scapegoat somebody else and say, well, because I can't afford that, that person can't afford that. And that is what racism and bigotry is all about, that you're unwilling to examine your own insecurities, your own failures, and instead you blame other people for what you can't have. And this Erin is a classic example, and I'd be surprised if her husband or boyfriend stays with her after something like this, but stranger things have happened.
Quite fascinating, but I gotta give somebody credit in that video. The brother, the black guy who was being accused. I mean, he handled himself like a real gentleman. He said nothing. He did not want to engage with this individual. He did not become defensive. He really stood there and really just showed the best of himself in that moment. I don't know if I would have been able to do that. If a random white woman approached me, David, at the Quick Trip and started calling me a drug dealer, I'm gonna give her some words back. He was really, really a nice guy. And listen, these Karens, they keep running into the nicest people.
Well, I wonder if perhaps, these people, I mean, they're able to show this dignity because they know it's coming, right? I'm sure as an African-American man, you've had this happen before.
Oh yeah.
For me, if somebody said this, I'd be so shocked and surprised that maybe I would react. But I almost think that, well, because it happens so often now, particularly a lot of African-American men and women, they're sort of conditioned to, okay, yeah, there is racism. And you actually have to sort of think through, well, how will I respond? And how do you respond? You try to de-escalate. You try to just sort of laugh it off and ignore it, as painful as it may be. And so, yeah, incredible kudos and credit to that guy for maintaining his composure and dignity, because I know a lot of folks, myself included, who would not have been able to handle it as well as he did.
Very well said. And there's another component here, and I call it the hand in glove. Karen is the hand. The glove would typically be law enforcement. And even if you know you're in the right, you know the other person is in the wrong, if they come at you in a particular way and you respond aggressively or you match their energy and it happens to be a white female, well, if law enforcement shows up as a black male, you have a full expectation that you're going to jail and somebody's gonna have to bail you out. And that's really part of the calculation in the response of black men. It's what if this gets to law enforcement? What if somebody pulls up and I'm inside of this argument now with this white female? What's going to happen to me?
Oh yeah, and that's white privilege right there. I mean, can you imagine? Let's suppose it was an African-American man who was, making accusations about a white couple in their nice car, and a police officer arrived. How would that police officer have handled it? And again, it gets to, we have different standards in terms of how police and how all of us sometimes look at these situations. And on a woman like this, Erin can get away with this absolute nonsense because she is a white woman, and because she's, well, thankfully for her, she had somebody she was dealing with people who were willing to sort of laugh it off and just say, hey, get in the car, Karen. But I mean, that's not always the situation. And the double standards in terms of how we evaluate, especially if you're a police officer responding on the scene, to me, that gets to one of the fundamental problems we have in our society today.
I don't like some of the words that the guy used. in order to calm down this particular Karen. But I do like the energy and the spirit and the passion to try to be a barrier between a false accusation, what is rooted, we know rooted in a racial context against a black couple who simply drives a nice car. So I appreciate that kind of passion.
Yeah, I mean, look, this was pure and simple racism, and good for the guy who was able to sort of be that barrier, and also better for the African-American couple that was able to just say, you know what, there are these crazy people out there, and that's just how it is, and we just got to deal with it.
Yeah. All right, next story. Not really surprising to me, and I don't think it's surprising to anybody who's watching. Donald Trump allegedly praised Hitler. He praised Hitler. Okay. So let me give you some background to this story. According to excerpts from an upcoming book obtained by CNN from Wall Street Journal reporter Michael Bender, then President Donald Trump allegedly praised Adolf Hitler during a conversation with then Chief of Staff John Kelly in 2018 during a Paris trip to commemorate World War I. Kelly had been explaining to the 45th president who the allies and adversaries were in both of the world wars, all right? So according to the narrative here, Donald Trump was very consistent and persistent about his belief that Adolf Hitler actually did some very good things, and he does not get the credit that he deserves. Let me take you to this CNN highlight.
This is the excerpt from Bender's book called "Frankly, We Did Win This Election." It says, quote, "Well, Hitler did a lot of good things," Trump told Kelly. When I asked Trump about the remark, he claimed the conversation never happened and he denied praising Hitler, but others said the remark stunned Kelly.
Have you figured out Trump's code yet? If he says it happened, it did not. If he says it did not happen, it did. That's the code of Donald Trump. If he says he did not have that conversation, he did have that conversation. According to a little more background, Bender also writes in the book that Trump was undeterred and persisted in his defense of the German dictator by claiming the country made economic gains under Hitler's leadership. Kelly was indeed stunned by the comment, so much he pushed back and reportedly said, and I quote, "Even if it was true that he was solely responsible for rebuilding the economy, on balance, you cannot ever say anything supportive of Adolf Hitler. You just can't." Spokesperson comes out, Liz Harrington, chief spokesperson for Trump, also told CNN on Wednesday, and I quote, "This is totally false. President Trump never said this. It is made up fake news, probably by a general who was incompetent and was fired." That'll do it, right? So classic methodology: duck, dodge, deny, deflect, and defame. That has been the strategy of the Trump administration and Donald Trump personally. He has now created a race to the bottom with all of his cronies and surrogates, and shame on them for supporting someone who not only supports the likes of Adolf Hitler, but also white supremacy in general. David?
Well, John Kelly's absolutely right. You cannot say anything positive about Adolf Hitler. I would say even if you're an academic and you're a historian and it's your job to try to understand how Hitler came to power and his political acumen, say coming out of World War II, and how he put together this National Socialist Party, even if you can say, well, maybe he was politically exceptional in the 1920s and 1930s, it's still not appropriate. It's not appropriate to say that, I think, in public, or to even, and by the way, Donald Trump is not an academic. He's not somebody, he's somebody who had to be explained to him whose side we were on in World War I and how World War II happened. And so it's disturbing, as somebody who lost entire branches of their family in World War II, anytime I hear anybody saying anything positive about Hitler or Nazi Germany, it is sickening. And the danger that I see is, never mind Trump being an incompetent fool, but it seems to signal, I think, to the neo-fascists, to the white supremacists in the United States, that maybe it is okay to start I don't know, doing some of the things that Adolf Hitler or the Nazis did. And Donald Trump is now giving people permission to have this conversation. And that's where I see the big danger in all this really coming from, because we start to go down that slippery slope to where more and more people say, oh, Hitler did some nice things and he was good at the economy and he was a good organizer. And before we know it, we have people who are embracing things about Adolf Hitler that lead to the sort of fascism that we're so worried about we're leading to right now in the United States. And to me, that's so frightening and dangerous.
Donald Trump did not create racist people in America. He made them comfortable.
Yeah.
And in making them comfortable, he created a radicalization effect. That's why you see the January 6th attack. That's why you will see continued uprisings that I think the FBI will probably be reporting about very soon. That's why you see these militia meetings happening. We just got a report about one of them that the FBI already infiltrated a few days ago. That's not in a silo. That's not separate. That's part of a design. That's part of a system that's happening in this country right now. There's this interesting story, David. A police officer goes to a wedding. He's off duty. He goes to a wedding, to a reception. He decides to say a bunch of racist stuff. They tell him, you got to stop saying these racist things or you have to leave. You need to get out. Well, he decides to not listen to reason and he gets knocked out cold. All right. Off-duty police officer attending a wedding reception got knocked out for his insanely racist comments. This guy's name is Tanner Holt. You see Tanner Holt? That's him. 22-year-old off-duty Knoxville police officer Tanner Holt last month was attending a local wedding reception when he began taunting a black guest by telling him he didn't know they let black people in the reception hall. Okay, obviously you're racist. This is not a funny joke. Maybe you've hit the sauce a little too hard. You need to keep it moving. Holt then claimed that he was part of the black community, despite being obviously white. At which point the black man asked him to stop talking about racial issues. Well, according to the witnesses at this reception, Officer Holt did not stop being racist. Now, remember, I don't condone knocking anybody out, but I simply assume at this point, the physical altercation against Mr. Holt was justified because nobody was arrested at the reception and police did respond. After making repeated pleas with Holt to stop being racist, the black man apparently lost patience and slugged Holt, knocking him unconscious. Four witnesses corroborated the accounts of the incident. Notes, witnesses stated that Holt was very intoxicated when the incident occurred. Holt was transported to UT Medical Center for treatment. No charges have been filed in the incident. This took place on January 26th, just over a week after the Knoxville News Sentinel reported details on how Knoxville police commanders helped cover up an officer's racist harassment in 2019. 6 current and former officers told the local news outlets that the department tolerates a culture of racism. Well, you don't say. You were so bold that you thought your racism is also protected when you're off duty. David, your thoughts?
My thoughts are, I think we've reached a tipping point, and I think we're gonna see more and more of this where people are saying, you know what, enough. I'm tired of the racists, I'm tired of the threats, I'm tired of the sucker punches if you're an Asian American and somebody walks down the street and wants to beat you. And I think we saw this, for example, just a couple days ago in Philadelphia. Neo-Nazis marched into downtown Philadelphia, ordinary citizens, black and white, working together, chased them out and said, get the hell out of our city, and literally chased them out of town. I think people are saying, you know what? We cannot always count on the police and law enforcement to be there for us. If we have to take matters into our own hands, we're sorry about it, but that's how it's gonna be. And we're gonna stand together, we're gonna stop racism, we're gonna stop these threats, we're gonna stop these attacks, and we're gonna let the bullies know that there are consequences for their actions. And I think, Americans generally have had enough. And I think we're gonna see more and more of this happening, and I think it's a good thing. I don't condone violence either. I wish we could resolve all these things peacefully, but the fact that there were no charges filed in this particular case tells you everything you need to know.
Don't let Trump get your ass kicked. And that's what's starting to happen now. Okay, all right. David, it has been a pleasure, my friend. Tell people how they can follow your great work, brother.
You can follow me on Rebel HQ on TYT, the Facebook and YouTube pages there. You can also follow me on Twitter at David Schuster. And again, Dr. Richie, I'm so honored and congratulations on all your success. I'm thrilled for you, my man. Keep it going.
Thank you, brother. Iron sharpens iron, my friend. Thankful for everything that you do.
You got it.
All right, we got more on the other side. It's indisputable, stick and stay.
We are onto something that is going to be amazing, but what we need is your help.
The number one problem is there's too much power in too few hands.
Every single problem that we have can be traced back to dark money.
They take large donors, they serve large donors.
So these handful of gatekeepers try to dictate everything.
Like all of you already know, they don't work for you, they work for their donors. So fire them and hire people who will only work for you that say no corporate back money.
We are going to change the way we elect candidates in this country.
Uncorrupted Democrats, we're gonna fight for the issues and win on policy.
This is incredibly personal. We need free healthcare for everyone.
We're fighting for $15 minimum wage, single payer healthcare, debt-free college, and we are gonna get money out of politics once and for all.
I've taken a public pledge not to accept any corporate money.
Because the last thing we're gonna do is go into another presidential election and run a corporatist against a populist candidate.
At some point, the buck needs to stop, and it's gonna stop with us. It's gonna stop with Justice Democrats.
So who are we?
People who do not take corporate PAC money.
We're relying on small donors.
99.9% of our contributions came from people.
You're a Just Democrat, so you don't take any corporate PAC money.
I'm not influenced by money.
As a Justice Democrat, I made that pledge.
Not a betting. Absolutely not.
I will go to Congress unbossed and unbought.
We try to create a government which works for all of us.
That is what America's about, and that's what a representative democracy should be about.
We are just getting warmed up here.
Vote for uncorrupted Democrats. The fight starts now, it starts today, and it starts with you.
I've been honest with him. Like, yeah, I was upset with you and I shouldn't have done it. But instead I was like, I'm just trying to protect my engagement ring.
Did you know that more than 20% of the world's oxygen comes from the Amazon? Why? Because of trees. I know what you're thinking. Of course! So what do we want to do? We want to plant more trees so we can save the climate. It's quite literal. So that's what leads to our new partner, Plant Your Change. Love it. It's so easy. What they do is you take the credit or debit cards you already have and you plug it into the system. And if you so choose, you get to round up every purchase to the nearest dollar and they plant a tree for you, okay? Now you could also choose if you wanna do it on only certain kinds of purchases or only so often, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But literally every cent makes a difference here. It's Plant Your Change. And if you wanna know more information, just go to tyt.com/trees. Let's go save the planet together.
Now, top. No. No. No.
Today, a terrible day for the internet, a terrible day for America. The internet as we know it is not going to exist anymore.
A real dark day for information and yet another way that they're bleeding out the democracy.
We're now going to have these gatekeepers of information deciding what we can and can't see, and that's what scares me the most.
Whether you're conservative or progressive or anywhere in the middle, this is the one thing we should all agree to. Protect the internet, because the establishment is coming for it. Don't let them destroy the internet.
Welcome back to Indisputable. We got a lot of comments. Let me read some of these, and then we'll get into our next segment. Remember to follow us on Indisputable TYT and to subscribe to the YouTube channel Indisputable TYT. It's free, it's easy, it's simple. All right. Let's go to Twitter members. Rob says, I heard people this time last year threatening a civil war if Trump didn't win. After he lost and failed to overturn the election, they are still talking about a civil war. MAGA just doesn't believe in democracy. 100% correct. They do not believe in democracy, which means they also do not believe in the US Constitution as they proclaim. But they also don't actually believe in the Bible, do they? Let's go to Aline, middle-aged dragon mama. She looks like Stephen King's Carrie. They're all gonna laugh at you. That was good. Super chat. Funk Bone says Trump got those fools believing it's 200 years ago. Yeah. Snake Anthony 210. I want to see when one Karen encounters another Karen. Can there only be one? That would be great, like a Highlander thing, right? There can only be one Karen. That would be amazing. And we would highlight all of those Karen battles on this show. Diallo says, so how does he act when he's on duty? That's a great question, right? Great point. 18-wheel dragon says, mama said knock you out. Well, somebody did. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a remarkable guest on Indisputable, Varun Nakor, president of AAPI Victory Fund. Let's talk about a few things. Varun, good day, welcome to Indisputable.
Thanks so much for having me today, Dr. Ritchie.
Absolutely. I want to start talking about the increase of violence as it relates to Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders in the United States. We saw this happening, and I'm just talking statistical correlation. When Donald Trump started his rhetoric, we can see an increase happening, but there's been this sentiment of violence against individuals in that community. Explain the context for us.
Well, you're absolutely right. Since Donald Trump got elected, there's been a marked increase in hate crimes against Asian Americans. Part of the challenge, however, that we face nationally is that in a lot of states and localities, hate crimes and acts of violence are not necessarily tracked by attorneys general or police officials. And so while we have more lately seen better tracking, and we know specifically in New York City, results released the other day show there was a close to a 400% increase in acts of violence against the API community. It's largely indicative of this national sort of trend, and one might, on the face of it, believe that since COVID is on the decline, especially in urban areas, that we might see a decrease in violence, and yet the opposite is happening.
You know, this is just one of the saddest things when you have groups who have been targeted because of their race, ethnicity, their culture, their skin color. And that's why we're more powerful together as coalitions. Let's talk about coalition building. How can we provide a unified front to make sure we fight against this insanity happening in the community?
Well, it really starts with calling out injustice everywhere that we see it, right? So, and I think certainly the API community, can do a better job, and we've been very intentional about reaching out to our brothers and sisters in the Black, Indigenous, and Latino communities, and all of those, frankly, underserved, under-recognized, underappreciated in our country. So it starts with that as a base, but we really do need to call it out everywhere that we see it. There are so many injustices that are now sort of being surfaced by these last 4 terrible years of Donald Trump, frankly, where we had to deal with the vicious rhetoric coming out of the White House press room. And then to add insult to injury, the last 4 years where Donald Trump and his minions were essentially coming up with ways trying to target specific AAPI sub-ethnicities, Koreans and Vietnamese and Indians and South Asians and all of us, frankly, Chinese Americans, more prominently, and figuring out ways that he could stop the stem of immigration into this country. And so, frankly, just with surgical precisions, come up with policies that would inhibit the continual migration of folks, which the API community has been the fastest growing segment of this population, the number one, sort of set of immigrants into this country. So it really sort of started with that, and it's really unfortunate, but we have not seen some of that rhetoric kind of die down in terms of its aftermath and its sort of tail effect.
Varun, I know your background. You are a big alliance guy. You believe in building coalitions. This is not new for you. I mean, you've done this for a while. You were appointed under the Clinton administration. You've been this person, especially connecting the business community as well. So I want to ask you, man, because we had tragedies happen here in Georgia, and I'm sure you remember the guy who went on a killing spree and decided to shoot indiscriminately, killing those who were part of the Asian community. Initially there was this backlash of the right-wing rhetoric. And then people came out and said, oh, no, he didn't do this because they were Asian. Of course he did it. Of course, that was part of his calculation. Of course, we know that. Right. But then there was this third conversation. I want you to speak to this third part of the conversation. I had people calling my radio show that morning because I had Asian Americans on my show to talk about this stigma and this criminality against them happening, this discrimination. And I had people saying, well, we need you to stand up for us as well. Yeah. We need the voices on this other side for black people also, because we are more unified when we talk together. I want you to speak to that element of the movement.
Yeah, and it really is a movement. That's a very great point. And what this country is facing right now in terms of the larger racial conversation is, at least in my lifetime, and I'm middle-aged, let's say, it's probably been the most engaging, hard, emotional conversation that we're having as Americans, right, in my lifetime. So I feel like we can use this as an opportunity amidst all the pain, amidst all the suffering, amidst all the anguish that, frankly, all Americans, but particular, Americans of color are feeling, right? And specific to the Asian community, we have often not had to reconcile with the own racism that we felt growing up. I was in middle school during the Iran hostage crisis, and I remember people calling me names, the so-called nationalism that was rising up in the country at the time. And it reminded me of this current moment. It reminded me of the Muslim ban, right? And so there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to process as Asian Americans. And I feel the thing that gets me through this, frankly, is knowing that my brothers and sisters have my back. They are with me 100%. They're supporting me. It just makes me want to be better friends, better allies with all communities when they are going through a hard time, not just in the time of need.
Very well said, brother. And I want you to know we got your back here. We are 100% supportive, and I tell people this who are all part of the coalition. I will stand with you, for you, and behind you. You just tell me where I need to stand. Thank you so much, man. How can people follow you on social media?
Varun Nakor on Twitter, and Action Alliance on Twitter, and API Victory Fund on Twitter.
Thank you so much for your time and your advocacy. We'll talk soon.
My pleasure. Thank you, sir.
All right. We got more on the other side. The bullpen is coming up.
I'm Nina Turner, and we are on the road to revolution, baby.
Hello, somebody.
I know sometimes people talk about the angry black woman, but I'm gonna tell you something. If you ain't mad as a mofo about what's going on here, something is wrong with you.
When people ask me all the time, what are the lessons from 2020, is that progressives have to get more organized and we got to come together. We have to be as agile as neoliberals. The progressive movement has to understand that it's not just enough for us to have the right ideas. We are right on most of the ideas. We're not perfect, but we're 99% right because it is a humanitarian agenda, but we must get the power. We have to come together in a more unified way so that we utilize our power strategically to topple neoliberalism, and it's gonna happen.
Hi, I'm John, and I'm new to TikTok, but about 3 years ago, I started my daily political news show, The Damage Report, because I noticed this trend where every morning I was waking up to this tsunami of news that was just generally dreadful and horrifying and shocking, and I thought that if I could spend my time helping people to navigate this, serving as a bit of a life raft, pointing out which news is important and why, there are worse ways to spend your day. We're not an average news show, and we don't want our TikTok presence to be average either, so feel free to let us know what you'd like us to do on the platform, and maybe give us a follow at The Damage Report.
All right, Amazon Prime members, here's how you can subscribe for free on Twitch. Start by linking your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, and then click that little subscribe or resubscribe button below the stream on Twitch. Scroll down and select the subscribe free with Prime button, and then you're finished. Close out immediately and share your little subscription alert with the chat. Send a cute message along with it, and bathe in the sweet, twitchy, Bezos-funded love. Hashtag Bezos Bucks.
Hey everyone, Matteo Scarapore here, author of Black Buck, which is Shop TYT's first fiction book ever. I'm honored. So, Black Buck is about a young man named Darren who's living in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. He lives with his mom, he has his girlfriend, he has his best friend, he has his neighborhood, and his neighborhood has him. Darren's also working at a Starbucks in Midtown Manhattan. And one day, this man, who's real suave and good looking, comes in and asks Darren to give him his regular. But for some reason, Darren says no. This man named Rhett Daniels, who's the CEO of a startup called Someone, located on the 36th floor of the same building, is impressed. And he invites Darren upstairs, and then he extends an offer to join his elite sales team. Darren reluctantly joins, and he soon realizes that he's not the only black salesperson there. He's the only black person in the entire company. So he goes through hell and back in order to make it to the top. And once there, he has status, money, power, but he says, you know what? I don't like being the token black guy. So he hatches a plan to help other people of color infiltrate America's tech startup sales teams, redefining what it means to be a minority in the workplace. This book definitely, if you couldn't tell, touches on many things that are relevant to this moment that we're all living in right now. But it's also connected to the many moments in history that have come before today. I hope that you read it. I hope that you enjoy it. And if you want to order a copy, go to shoptyt.com. Thank you, be well, and happy 2021.
Welcome back to Indisputable. All right, let me read some of these viewer comments. TYT member Rob says, preach the word, Dr. Richie. Well, thank you, I try. Deanna says, no one can credibly say anything positive about Hitler, considering the Holocaust was the worst instance of murder, war crimes, genocide in modern history. I lost family from Prague at the hands of the Nazis. Despicable. Yeah, it is despicable. Super chat, YouTube. Divolve says, solidarity makes us all stronger. Thank you, TYT community. Absolutely correct. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the bullpen. In the bullpen today, he is a returning bullpen guest. We have Christopher Naiwame. Christopher Naiwame is a Republican advisor and also founder of American Veterans Policy Network, AVPN. Christopher, good to have you back on Indisputable. How are you?
Doing well, Doc. Thanks for having me back on the show.
All right, so brother, you know I gotta ask you to do that damn Trump impression you did before you came on the show today. I thought that was hilarious. Let's just break the ice, making fun of Trump a little bit.
Well, it's not making fun, Doc. It's impersonations. And by the way, if I spend enough time around you, I can maybe impersonate you as well. But we do want to talk a little bit. We want to talk a little bit about the lawsuit because you know, Doc, you treat me very unfairly on this show. You know it. Everyone knows it. Your whole team knows it. I can hear it in the earpiece. But let's just have a little bit of fun here, okay?
All right, that's good enough, brother. Okay, I actually like that. I appreciate you breaking the ice that way. News of the day, obviously, Donald Trump announced that he is going to sue. He has already filed his lawsuit, district federal court in Florida, against the major guys, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. And he's claiming, based on a specific allegation against Facebook and similar allegations against the other tech companies, that they violated his constitutional freedom of speech. I want you to tell us your thoughts about this lawsuit.
Right, so it's interesting. So I think that the lawsuit is about sending a signal. It's about the free speech. And I think in the context of, the universe, it is sort of an encroachment on free speech. However, we get into this issue of a private company and a private platform that has rules. And so I think the lawsuit, I think there's merits in the signal of this. I think these are companies that should be challenged because of many other reasons about inequality of free speech and the way in which they implement the rules. So I think the purpose is to send a signal. The legal standard for prevailing this lawsuit, I think it's very high, and many legal experts don't believe that it will prevail. And in the complaint, they do have a jury request, which is interesting, to send this potentially to a jury, but the bar would be high. So I think that this lawsuit is about a signal and a conversation around free speech, as opposed to the idea you don't have it. It's a matter of debating it on this platform, so to speak.
Christopher, I think you just low-key admitted it's a BS lawsuit.
Well, it depends on what the lawsuit's trying to achieve, right? So I've actually won a federal lawsuit a few years back, defamation related, a little bit different, but the bar for winning a lawsuit is high. So it depends on what the purpose is. Sometimes you sue people to quiet them, to slow them down, to send a signal. But in terms of fighting to win, as the former president often said, I don't think that will happen here in the court.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because obviously he has a major issue. And the major issue is the actual US Constitution, because the Constitution says that Congress shall not make a rule or a law to abridge the freedom of speech. That's the Constitution. The last time I checked, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, they are not the US Congress. Congress cannot make a rule to limit or abridge that freedom of speech. But even with your freedom of speech, there comes the reality of responsibility. If you start to cry out fire in a crowded building, there's no fire, well, you can be arrested if people get injured, right? So your freedom of speech has statutory limitations by law. Every freedom has a statutory limitation. Now, here's what I believe Trump is doing, brother. And I want you to tell me, am I completely off basis? I think Trump is playing his political base. I think he's making people believe that he actually has a credible lawsuit when you know he doesn't. His lawyers know he does not. He knows he has no credible lawsuit. I think he's playing his political base to do a few things. One, as a catalyst to get him back in the news and back in the conversation every day of the average American, because he no longer has the power of Twitter to make breaking news when he chooses. Number two, I think he has launched this lawsuit so that he can create a great evil. He likes to create his villains, and he's creating the new villain. The new villain is going to be these big tech companies. And when he loses the case or the case gets thrown out, Christopher, he's going to then claim that the judges that threw it out, they are part of the problem, making them part of the villain argument. And he's going to raise, number 3, a whole bunch of money, not for the legal case, because they all know this is not actually going to trial. He would never subject himself to discovery or anything else, but he's going to raise a lot of money in the process over a case that is frivolous and truly fraudulent.
I don't think you're wrong in any of those points. I think that's sort of the chronology of the attack plan that the president's used in politics and in business, and it's served its purpose in many of those forums. But I think the key here, though, I think he's on to one thing, and I do think that the big tech is so unbelievably driven by us, and you can see certain folks get just hammered and shut down. And oftentimes with speech, we're in this era now where we're looking at violent altercations and incite to violence and these sensitive issues, but yet on the one hand, you could have implicit violence and statements that just fly around and there's no issue. And then you might have somebody maybe on the conservative side that makes an allusion to something, they're shut down. And oftentimes there's no court in the social media bar, so to speak. I mean, it is simply, we saw this. If you're a comedian, for example, and you make a joke in context, it's, you've been flagged for hate speech. Don't let it happen again. So you're going to keep your account, but you never get and that's happening a lot to conservatives. So I would say there's some merit to taking them on and putting this conversation out publicly. But then to be fair, if Republicans are free market, if you don't like the bar, go to the bar next door, open a new platform, something like that. So I would agree with you that, you can't have it both ways.
That was actually my second point of the hypocrisy that's involved here, because Republicans are big free market people. They believe that consumers or consumerism should actually drive the market reality, not regulation. Now think about how ironic this is, Christopher. You have a guy, Donald Trump, as well as others who are saying we need regulation in this industry, but their political platform is a deregulation platform. But they would like the courts to get in and literally regulate private companies when that methodology and ideology is completely adversarial to their political platform. Please explain to me how these hypocrisies coexist within the Republican Party.
Well, those are challenging questions to answer, because obviously in politics you want to win, you want to focus on your agenda over here, and you don't want to get caught in areas where you have inconsistencies. And I think both parties fall into those things. It's challenging. I mean, I think that they're going to push to the sort of monopoly of big tech, but that's a difficult question to answer. I mean, essentially, it is what it is. I mean, that's kind of the name of the game in politics is, you try to run out the clock before, you have to get pinned down on that. We've seen that with folks on the left that are doing really big on civil rights issues. And then you have Senator Sheldon Whitehouse who's cornered and he's asked a question about an all members white club and he's running faster than the Roadrunner to his car. So, I mean, if we're looking for hypocrites in Congress, we've got nearly 435 of them in the House and 100 of them in the Senate some days.
So let me tell you, man, and I got criticized by a lot of Democrats for this. I called out that senator because his position is hypocritical to his actual lifestyle. And remember, in that case, this is out of Rhode Island. In that case, he literally owns or is part owner. His wife owns significant shares in a country club that will not allow black members. And he said he would basically discontinue his affiliation with them when he ran for Senate the first time. Well, they paid him off. He got money. His wife is now a majority shareholder. So my point in that is you got a price. Now, yes, you may vote the way I would like you to vote on most, if not many issues, but you have a price and you have told people you have a price. And I have a problem with that. So the difference between myself and some others, Christopher, I'm willing to call out Democrats as quick as I'm willing to call out you guys. And I'm comfortable in that space. But you're saying on my show that the hypocrisy that is evident here is basically just normative business. And I don't agree that our politics should run that way. I believe in a transformational matrix in politics rather than a transactional one. And if you're okay with the transactional element where you can present one value system one day and another value system the next based on your own selfish need, then we're all screwed. Would you not agree?
No, I would agree. It's frustrating to work within that paradigm, and we have elections. House elections are up every 2 years, and it's very seldom. I don't even really know what era we're in now. I mean, we've been in an era of divided government since the 1970s. Now we're in an era of almost bombastic politics. And what's interesting is if you look at some of the more visible members of the Congress, for example, the AOCs, Dan Crenshaw's, there's studies that show they're legislatively ineffective, which is kind of interesting because the way that the House is set up, you don't actually get a lot of opportunity to amend bills. So it's ironic we're looking at that, but then the whole, as you described, the sort of the chessboard of how things actually get done is often held up. So I totally agree with you. My emphasis though is I do think that if the conversation ends with the big tech companies taking a little more look at how can we come into the middle here and allow certain speech, I get it. And with the incitement to violence stuff, I agree 99%. The problem is if you have reporting, for example, that says Trump's followers, storm Capitol. The only issue I have with that is when you have a politician that says certain things, and then you have a Bernie Sanders supporter that shoots members of Congress, or you have Dallas police officers get shot the same week that Obama was talking about, there was an issue, and I'm not saying he's responsible for it, but I'm saying now do we get into every single public statement when 1% of a fraction of a crowd does something violent? Do you see what I'm saying? So I think we just have to look at the boundaries.
Let me make another argument and show a distinction that makes a difference. There are two elements in the law. One is called causation and the other is proximity. So when you look at causation, it is very clear because we now have testimony, sworn affidavits from individuals that raided the Capitol. Those insurrectionists said we would not have done it if Donald Trump did not tell us to. That's on the record. So you have causation. Causation is present. And then you have proximity. Proximity means that the criminal act happened within proximity of causation. So Trump says it, and within minutes, they were doing the criminal act. So you've proven causation, you've proven proximity, and you can prove the criminal activity. So that's the reason why that's different from, let's say, a random Bernie Sanders supporter committing an act of random violence, because you cannot prove causation and you cannot prove proximity, but you can only prove criminality. So those are the big differences. Let me go to another point you made about AOC and the squad not being legislatively effective. The study that you're referencing is actually talking about their legislative agenda in whole. Them getting 100% of what they are asking for. Now, true, they don't, but they push the needle. And pushing the needle in politics is still the way the political game works. Remember, this is chess, not checkers. So here's why it's not checkers. It's not checkers because it's not based on one move or the other. You're not defined based on one singular move. You're defined based on strategic alignment. You're defined based on how you can position the pieces in a way to give your side the ultimate advantage. And I make the argument that AOC and others, what they have been able to do is create more of a mainstream conversation and mainstream political approach as it relates to true progressive policies in the US Congress. Would you not agree that they have moved the needle, at least on the Democratic side, for what is acceptable as progressive policy?
They have, and I'll give AOC some credit on something. When you step up and you go out and you do something, you should be credited. I don't care if you are unemployed, living in the street, or if what you are. If you go in and you run and you put yourself out there, I think you deserve credit. And that's something that I think is undercredited with her. So I do agree that they're moving the needle. We could probably disagree for several hours on whether some of these are good things. I think some of the aspects of the Green New Deal shut down the economy. But one thing about the discussion with Trump, I'd agree with you with one caveat. I could also statistically say if someone gives a speech and it's passionate and there's certain words that concern someone, if 99% of that crowd is peaceful and goes home and screams at the television, and then you have a small percent that commits a crime, I think we still have to look at I think there's still a conversation there. And lastly, it's the most striking thing to me is how the Capitol Police and how policymakers can't possibly be prepared for scenarios like that. I mean, our military's job is to protect our shores, right? I can't, if your job is to guard the Capitol and you let people go in there, I think everyone should have 10-year prison sentences. And I actually might sound radical. I think if you break in the Capitol, you should be shot. That's me. I might be totally in the rare thing there, but it surprises me that that was even.
That surprises you, brother?
What's that?
Come on, man. Come on, brother. And let me say this. I appreciate you saying that from my heart. I appreciate you saying that because you know and I know that if the people who stormed the Capitol broke in, made makeshift weapons, some brought weapons of their own. If this would have happened and their last names would have been Muhammad, they would have been killed. If this would have happened and those would have been black faces storming that Capitol, they would have been prepared. President Trump would have ordered a preparation in advance. The systems that failed us, that failed those members of Congress that day, Republican and Democrats, those systems decided not to take seriously the known threat that was coming. They already saw the social media rhetoric. They were well aware that people intended to do some level of violence. And they even called, according to the Capitol report, they called for backup. Backup came hours later. So you have all of these systemic failures. None of that would have happened if this would have been black folk, brown folk, folk of a particular religion. All of the systems would have worked just fine, brother. And I think you know it.
So I don't want to avoid the question. I first and foremost, I think whenever you have a high intensity situation, having overwhelming support and overwhelming security is a smart thing. And that was my primary point is I just don't think you should wait because once a problem happens, it's almost impossible to put the toothpaste back in the jar. I could speak to unknowns. I mean, certainly the president's, he had more influence to influence that situation in a positive way. But we've seen elected officials in the past give people space to ruin and destroy. They're going to keep going. I think certainly many public figures could be mindful of the things they're saying in certain scenarios. But look, my main point on that is I can't believe that we have a military budget of hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars and we can't afford to protect our capital on the one day where maybe something's going to jump off. I think that was a mistake at multiple levels of government. As we know, we've got the city, the district rather, we've got the Capitol Police, we've got the military. I just think it was a failure at multiple levels.
Yeah, but it also talks to the white privilege that exists in the United States because you cannot dismiss the fact that these were white people. That white people committed an act of domestic terrorism. And you as a former military man, you have to appreciate the irony here because you have said they should have been shot. Well, they weren't. Well, at least, 99.9%. Nothing happened, right? They're still trying to round them up because they were allowed to leave. They weren't even arrested there. They got to watch videos and say, okay, we got to go pick these people up. Why do they have to go pick them up? Because we made a big deal about it. They were allowed to leave after the terrorist attack. They were allowed to go home, cook dinner that night, get on their plane, get on the bus, drive their car, and leave a terrorist attack without criminal penalty whatsoever. Do you not think that there's a real correlation between what they did, how they got away with it initially, and the fact that they are white?
Well, the challenge, though, again, if we want to look at statistics, is if you look at the entire crowd, when we have a fraction of that population doing something, the generic response to that could be, well, 95% of the white crowd had nothing violent to do. And we could look at some of the urban violence all over the summer and we could get into, I think it gets a little difficult when you start looking at the statistical analysis of the criminality.
Oh, come on.
And one of the conversations, and one of the things, Doc, and this is important from our last conversation that's germane is, and there's societal reasons for this, in many of those traffic stops, African-American men are more likely to resist arrest. And there could be a variety of reasons for why compared to the Asian Hispanic in a study that we didn't get time to on the last show. So I think it's very important discussion, but we need to really focus in on the statistics. And I would just say, if 95% of a crowd isn't violent, we're looking at a different sample size. I think the Capitol should have been guarded more strongly. If you can't protect the Capitol, what the hell can you protect? I think that's outrageous.
And you were protecting more than the Capitol. You were literally protecting a constitutionally mandated process known as certification of the Electoral College. That's constitutionally mandated. You cannot tell me you love the Constitution and then you're willing to literally violate the actual Constitution in the process of the constitutional mandate. So you can't coexist in these worlds to me. Either you are or you are not, right? We only got 2 minutes left, brother. Let me ask you this question, because I think it's going to come up in this case that Trump has filed. He has filed a class action lawsuit. A class action lawsuit says, I'm the lead litigant, but I'm filing this lawsuit on behalf of all of these other conservative voices that have been silenced by this unconstitutional element from Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Here's the problem with that argument on the other side. Candace Owens still got her social media account. Ben Shapiro still got his. Hannity, Tucker, all of the big social media talkers and broadcasters still have their social media accounts intact. So how is he going to make the argument that this is about conservatism when truly the reason why they still have their accounts intact is because they have not tried to incite violence, at least on the scale that Trump did? What's your answer to that?
Well, and that's why the suit will likely not prevail. That's what the counsel for the big tech will make, and I think that will work to their advantage. But you mentioned Ben Shapiro. He said some years ago, but he made an interesting point. He's like, we just have to be careful, whether it's Alex Jones or anybody. If we're going to blame someone, I mean, is Ozzy Osbourne responsible if someone takes their own life because they listen to a song called "Suicide Solution"? It's tricky, but I think you nailed it. That the sort of the broadness and the bully pulpit effect of the president is where that's coming from. And we have to be honest, obviously the relationship has not been friendly between the president and those executives from those companies. But hopefully the conversation will at least end with us taking closer looks at those things, because I do think big tech should at least have some accountability for implementing their own rules equally or closer to equal.
Okay, all right, and to the point about the song, the reason why a person or artist who sings a song or raps something cannot be held responsible for a criminal act because somebody listened to the song is because you need something called mens rea. You need mens rea, which means the intent to commit a crime in order for that to work, or the intent to radicalize somebody to commit a crime. Without that intent, you don't have the causation factor. Brother, I appreciate you being on the show again. Tell people how they can follow you on social media.
At Chris Nyland, first name last, for Twitter, and I'm pretty easy to find. Thanks for having me, Doc.
Man, you're a very reasonable guy, man. I appreciate you being on Indisputable. Come back anytime.
Thanks, Doc. Appreciate it.
All right, we got no more show left. Ladies and gentlemen, remember these things. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, and take care of this planet. And remember, the truth is always indisputable.